The little girl's hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the torn stuffed rabbit. Blood streaked down her mother's face from a gash above her eyebrow, and the cafe had gone completely silent. Every eye in the room locked onto the man in the $15,000 suit, the billionaire who'd just watched a desperate mother collapse at his feet. Mason Reed had exactly 3 seconds to make a choice that would either save or destroy 4 lives forever. He had no idea this moment would haunt him for the next 3 years. Before we dive into this story, I want to invite you to stick around until the very end. Trust me, you won't see the twist coming. And hey, drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Now, let's go back to where it all began. The rain came down like nails against the windows of Sterling and Kimball Cafe, each drop exploding against the glass with enough force to make the whole building shudder. Mason Reed sat in the corner booth. His corner booth, the one the staff kept perpetually reserved even when he didn't show up, staring at a laptop screen that had gone dark 15 minutes ago. He hadn't noticed. His coffee had gone cold an hour before that. The ceramic mug sat untouched, a brown ring forming where the liquid met air, slowly evaporating into nothing, kind of like his marriage had, kind of like most things in his life if he was being honest, which he rarely was. At 32, Mason Reed had everything a man could want according to Forbes, Fortune, and every other publication that measured success in zeros. His consulting empire had pulled in $400 million last year. His penthouse overlooked Lake Michigan from the kind of height that made normal people dizzy. His son attended the most expensive private school in Chicago, where tuition cost more than most people's yearly salary. And Mason felt absolutely nothing about any of it. The cafe hummed with the white noise of other people's lives. A college student hunched over textbooks 3 tables away, yellow highlighter bleeding through thin pages. 2 businessmen argued near the counter about market projections, their voices sharp with the kind of desperation that came from middle management. An elderly woman sat alone by the window, hands wrapped around her cup like she was trying to absorb its warmth directly through her palms. Mason watched them all with the detached interest of someone observing fish in an aquarium. His phone buzzed. Again. The 14th message from his assistant in the past 2 hours. He glanced at the preview without opening it. Mr. Reed, the Singapore investors are waiting. Should I reschedule? They've been on hold for 40 minutes. He should care about that. Singapore represented a potential $70 million contract. 7 months of negotiations, hundreds of hours of research, proposals, presentations. He swiped the notification away. The door chimed. Mason didn't look up. People came and went. That's what people did. They moved through spaces like water, filling containers temporarily before evaporating or spilling out, leaving nothing but residue. His ex-wife had told him once that he saw the world like a balance sheet, assets and liabilities, profit and loss. She'd screamed it, actually, during their last fight, the one that happened at 2 a.m. when their son was sleeping down the hall, the one where she'd thrown her wedding ring at him and it had bounced off his chest and skittered under the refrigerator where it probably still sat collecting dust. You don't feel anything, Mason. You just calculate. Everything's a transaction to you. Even me. Even Noah. She'd been wrong about that. He felt plenty. He just didn't know what to do with it anymore, so he'd gotten very good at shutting it down, boxing it up, storing it in whatever part of his brain handled things that didn't fit on spreadsheets. The door chimed again. This time, something made him look up. A woman stumbled through the entrance, soaked to the bone despite the overhang outside. Her jacket, thin, threadbare, definitely not waterproof, clung to her frame like wet paper. Dark hair plastered against her face in chaotic strands. She was juggling 2 small children, a diaper bag that was coming apart at the seams, and what looked like a portfolio folder that she clutched against her chest like a shield. One of the children was crying. Not the dramatic wailing of a tantrum, but the exhausted, hiccuping sobs of a kid who'd been crying for so long they'd forgotten why they started. The woman's eyes swept the cafe with the frantic energy of someone looking for a life raft. They landed on an empty table near the bathroom, the worst spot in the place, cramped and cold, and right next to the kitchen doors that kept swinging open with blasts of heat and noise. Nobody else would sit there. She made a beeline for it like it was salvation. Mason watched her collapse into the chair, watched her try to simultaneously calm the crying child, dig through her bag for something, and keep the older girl, maybe 5 or 6, from wandering off. It was like watching someone juggle chainsaws while balancing on a tightrope. The older girl had blonde hair tangled and damp. She wore a pink raincoat 2 sizes too big, the sleeves rolled up multiple times but still covering her hands. She was clutching something against her chest, holding it the way kids held precious things. The woman finally found what she was looking for in her bag, a bottle for the younger child. But her hands were shaking so badly she couldn't get the cap off. She tried 3 times, her jaw clenched with the kind of frustration that comes right before tears. Mason looked away. Not his problem. He had a company to run, investors to call back, a son he needed to pick up from school in 3 hours. His own life was complicated enough without adding other people's disasters to it. He opened his laptop. The screen flickered to life, displaying the email he'd been trying to write for the past hour. 3 sentences. That's all he'd managed. 3 sentences to investors who expected brilliance, innovation, the kind of visionary thinking that justified Mason's reputation as the boy wonder of Chicago's consulting scene. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. Nothing came. The crying had stopped. Mason glanced up without meaning to. The woman had finally gotten the bottle open and the younger child, couldn't be more than 2, was drinking with the desperate intensity of someone who'd been waiting too long. The mother's eyes were closed, her lips moved slightly, and Mason realized she was counting. Slow, deliberate breaths. The kind of counting people did when they were holding themselves together by threads. The older girl had wandered over to the window, pressing her face against the glass, watching the rain with the fascination unique to children who saw magic and things adults had learned to hate. She was still holding whatever she'd brought in. A stuffed animal, Mason realized. A rabbit, gray and worn, with one ear hanging by literal threads. His phone buzzed again. A different assistant this time. Melissa, his personal one, the one who managed his actual life as opposed to just his company. Reminder, Noah's parent-teacher conference is tomorrow at 3 p.m. Ms. Patterson says it's important. She used the word concerning twice in her email. Concerning. That was a fun word to get about your 8-year-old. Mason typed back, reschedule. The reply came instantly. This is the 3rd reschedule. She said if you can't make this one, she's escalating to the headmaster. He stared at the message. Escalating. Like his son was a problem that needed to be elevated through proper channels. Like parenthood had a chain of command. Maybe it did. Maybe that's why he was failing at it. He'd hired the best nanny money could buy. Noah went to the best school, had the best tutors, the best therapist, because, of course, the divorce had required a therapist. The school had insisted on it, another box to check. Mason provided everything a child could need, except time, except presence, except whatever the hell it was that fathers were supposed to give their sons that couldn't be purchased or delegated or scheduled into 30-minute blocks. Movement caught his eye. The blonde girl was walking toward him. No, not toward him. Toward his table. Her small feet in worn sneakers squeaking slightly on the tile floor. She was holding the rabbit out in front of her like an offering, and her eyes, huge, brown, too old for her face, were locked onto Mason with the kind of desperate hope that made his chest tight. She stopped 3 feet from his table. Mason stared at her. She stared back. The cafe noise seemed to fade. The espresso machine's hiss, the murmur of conversations, the rain against the windows, all of it dimmed to nothing. There was just this child, this small human with tangled hair and a too big coat and a broken toy, looking at him like he might be able to fix something. "Sir?" Her voice was barely a whisper, shaking like leaves before a storm. Can you help fix him?" She held up the rabbit. The dangling ear swayed slightly. Up close, Mason could see the thing was ancient, fur worn down to the threading in patches, multiple amateur repair jobs visible in different colored threads, a button eye that didn't match its partner. This wasn't just a toy. This was history. This was love made tangible through years of holding, sleeping, crying into soft fur that had absorbed a childhood's worth of secrets. Mason's voice came out rough. He cleared his throat. "I don't know how to fix stuffed animals." The girl's face crumpled. Not into tears, worse than that. Into the kind of resignation that kids shouldn't know how to do. The look that said she'd expected disappointment, had braced for it, but it still hurt anyway. "Ava!" The mother's voice cracked across the cafe. She was up, moving toward them with quick, apologetic steps. "I'm so sorry, sir. She didn't mean to bother you." "Ava, Come here right now." But Ava didn't move. She kept looking at Mason, and something in her expression made his carefully constructed walls crack just slightly. "My daddy gave him to me," Ava whispered, "before he died, and I promised I'd take care of him, but his ear is falling off, and Mommy doesn't have money to fix him, and I tried to do it myself, but I made it worse, and—" "Ava, stop." The mother reached them, grabbing the girl's shoulder gently but firmly. She looked at Mason with eyes that held equal parts mortification and exhaustion. "I apologize. We'll leave you alone." Mason opened his mouth. He wasn't sure what would come out. Probably something dismissive. Something that would end this interaction and let him return to his comfortable numbness. Instead, he heard himself say, "There's a repair shop on 5th Street, Mrs. Chen. She's fixed things for me before." Why did he say that? He'd never been to a repair shop in his life. He didn't fix things. He replaced them. But the lie came out smooth, practiced, and the woman's face shifted from embarrassment to something more complicated. We can't afford," she started, then stopped, pride and desperation visibly warring across her features. The little girl, Ava, was looking at him like he'd just promised her the moon. Mason did the calculation instantly. It was what he did, what his brain was wired to do. This woman was clearly struggling. The worn clothes, the falling apart bag, the way she'd gone straight for the worst table in the cafe without even looking for better options. Those were data points. The child's statement about money was another. The whole picture suggested someone on the edge of financial collapse. Helping would cost him nothing. Money he wouldn't notice. Time he was wasting, anyway. But it would also crack open a door he'd very deliberately sealed shut years ago. The door that led to caring about other people's problems, to involvement, to the messy, complicated, utterly unpredictable chaos of human connection. He'd learned the hard way that caring was expensive in ways that had nothing to do with money. "Mrs. Chen doesn't charge much," he heard himself say. Another lie. "And it's on my way. I could give you a ride there." The woman stiffened. "No, thank you, but no, we don't need—" "Mommy, please!" Ava's voice rose, desperate. "Please, can we fix him? I promised, Daddy. I promised." And that's when Elena Brooks, though Mason didn't know her name yet, started to cry. Not dramatic sobs, just tears, silent and quick, sliding down her cheeks while she tried to hold her face steady. She wiped them away with shaking hands, looking anywhere but at Mason or her daughter. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry. We're fine. Ava, we'll find a way. But we can't bother this nice man. He has important things to do." Mason looked at his laptop, at the 3-sentence email that was supposed to secure $70 million, at the phone full of messages from people who needed him, wanted him, expected him to perform miracles of business strategy and market analysis. Important things. He thought about his son, sitting in a classroom at that moment, probably staring out a window the way he always did according to the teacher's emails that Mason skimmed and delegated to the nanny to handle. Important things. He thought about the empty penthouse waiting for him tonight, the silence that filled rooms designed to impress people he didn't like. "I'm heading that direction anyway," Mason said, surprising himself. "It's no trouble." Elena looked at him with suspicion born from experience. "Why would you do that?" Fair question. Mason didn't have a good answer. Or rather, he had too many answers, and none of them made logical sense. "Because your daughter's voice reminds me that my own son never looks at me like I could fix anything. Because you're crying in a cafe and trying to hide it. And I remember what that feels like. Because I've been sitting here for 2 hours feeling nothing, and suddenly I feel something and I don't want it to stop yet." "Because the rabbit looks important," he said finally. Ava hugged the worn toy tighter. "He is. He's the most important thing ever." Elena closed her eyes. Mason watched her make the calculation, weighing pride against necessity, dignity against the desperate need visible in her daughter's face. "Just to the repair shop," she said quietly, "and I'll pay you back for gas." Deal. It was the easiest $400 million negotiation Mason had ever closed. Sack. 20 minutes later, Mason found himself doing something he hadn't done in years, helping someone load children into his car. His Range Rover, matte black, custom interior, worth more than most people's houses, had never contained children except Noah, and even then only in the custody-mandated weekend rotation that happened under the nanny's supervision. Now there were two. Ava climbed into the back seat with reverent care, like she was boarding a spaceship. Her sister, Rosie, Elena had called her during the hurried introductions, went into the car seat that Mason hadn't known was still in his trunk from 3 months ago when Noah had briefly been young enough to need one. Elena sat in front, perched on the edge of the leather seat like she was afraid to fully commit to it. She kept her portfolio folder on her lap, hands gripping it white-knuckled. Mason pulled out into Chicago traffic, windshield wipers working overtime against rain that showed no signs of stopping. Nobody spoke. The silence felt different than the silence in the cafe. That had been the comfortable numbness of isolation. This was awkward, loaded, full of unspoken questions and tensions. Ava broke it. "Is this your job car?" she asked from the back seat. "It." Mason glanced in the rearview mirror. She was staring around the interior with wide eyes, taking in details. "Sort of. I use it for work sometimes." "What's your job?" "I help companies solve problems." "What kind of problems?" Elena turned slightly. "Ava, don't interrogate the nice man." "I'm not interrogating. I'm just asking questions." "That's what interrogating means, sweetie." Mason felt something unexpected, the ghost of a smile. "It's fine. I help businesses figure out how to work better, make more money, grow bigger." "Oh." Ava processed this. "Daddy helped people too. He saved them from fires." The silence returned, heavier now. "Your father was a firefighter," Mason said. Not a question. "Station 47, Elena said quietly, still staring out the window. 8 years. He died 4 years ago during a warehouse fire on the south side." The words came out flat, practiced. This was a story she'd told before, too many times, to too many people. Social workers, insurance agents, school administrators. Each telling wore the edges off until it became just facts, just data points in the narrative of her life. "I'm sorry," Mason said, and meant it. "Everyone is." Elena's laugh was bitter. "Sorry doesn't pay rent, though. Doesn't—" Ava kicked her feet against the seat back. "Mommy, you're not supposed to talk about money being hard in front of other people. Remember? You said it makes people uncomfortable." Elena's face flushed. "Ava—" "It's okay," Mason interrupted. "Money should make people uncomfortable when it's hard." He didn't know why he said that. It wasn't something he'd ever thought before. Money had never been hard for him, not since he was 14 and coded his first app that sold for 6 figures. Money was easy. People were hard. But looking at Elena's profile, the tension in her jaw, the way her fingers kept readjusting their grip on that folder like it was the only solid thing in her world, he understood something he'd been too successful to see before. Money wasn't just numbers. For some people, it was survival. It was dignity. It was the difference between fixing a child's beloved toy or watching it fall apart while you explained why you couldn't help. "Where are you headed after this?" Mason asked. "You mentioned being on the way somewhere." Elena hesitated. Then, "Job interview, downtown, at 2:30. Mason glanced at the dashboard clock. 1:47 p.m. "You're going to be late." "I know." Her voice was tight. "The bus route was flooded. We had to get off 3 stops early and walk, but Rosie couldn't walk that far in the rain, so I had to carry her, and then we needed to get dry and warm, and I thought maybe we could wait in the cafe until it was time, but then Ava saw you, and—" She stopped, took a breath. "I know. I'm going to be late. Story of my life." In the back seat, Ava had started singing softly to the rabbit. A lullaby, maybe. Something wordless and sad. Mason made a decision. "Where's the interview?" "Weston Building, 23rd floor." He knew it. Glass tower in the loop, corporate offices, the kind of place that cared very much about punctuality and appearances. "Mrs. Chen can wait," Mason said. "I'll take you to your interview first." "What? No, you've already done too much. I can't—" "You can't show up late to a job interview because you stopped to help your daughter." Mason's voice came out harder than intended. "That's not how this works." "How what works?" Mason didn't answer because he wasn't sure himself. How life works. How fairness works. How the universe was supposed to operate when it clearly didn't. "The interview," he said instead. "What's the job?" Elena was quiet for a long moment, then, Administrative assistant, healthcare company, 32,000 a year. 32,000. Mason spent more than that on car maintenance. What are you making now? I'm not. I lost my last position 6 weeks ago. Budget cuts. She said it matter-of-factly, but Mason heard the tremor underneath. Before that, I was making 28 at a property management company. Before that, 25 doing data entry. Before that, she stopped. You don't want my employment history. What did you do before your husband died? The question came out too personal, too direct. Mason knew it the second the words left his mouth, but Elena answered anyway. I was finishing my degree, business administration, 2 semesters left. She laughed without humor. That was the plan. Derek worked, I studied, then I'd graduate, get a good job. He'd think about retirement in 20 years. We had it all figured out. What happened? Life. Death. Reality. Elena's fingers drummed against the folder. Turns out daycare for 2 kids costs more than entry-level administrative jobs pay. Turns out degrees don't mean much when you've got a 4-year gap in your resume. Turns out the world doesn't actually care about your plans. In the back, Rosie started to fuss. Elena twisted around, reaching back to adjust the pacifier. Almost there, baby. Just a little longer. Her voice changed completely when she talked to her children. Softened. Lost the edge. Became something Mason recognized from distant memories of his own mother before the cancer, before everything fell apart. Love. That's what that was. Pure, uncomplicated, fierce. The kind of love that made you stop in a cafe during a rainstorm because your daughter needed her rabbit fixed. The kind that made you drag 2 small children to a job interview you'd probably be late for because missing it meant missing rent. Mason's phone buzzed. He ignored it. They drove in silence through downtown Chicago, past buildings where Mason had closed deals, signed contracts, made money in amounts that would seem fictional to the woman sitting beside him. The Weston Building appeared ahead, all glass and steel and aggressive modernity. Mason pulled up to the entrance. What time does it end? What? The interview. What time should I pick you up? Elena stared at him like he'd started speaking another language. You're not... I can't ask you to wait. We'll take the bus home. In the rain, with 2 kids, after you've been through whatever happens in there. Mason shook his head. What time? I don't even know if I'll get the job. Probably not, Mason said bluntly. You're showing up late and clearly stressed, but that's not the point. What time? Elena's mouth opened, closed. She looked torn between gratitude and anger, like she couldn't decide if she was being helped or insulted. 3 o'clock, she finally said. They said an hour. I'll be here at 3. Why are you doing this? Mason looked at her. Really looked. Saw the exhaustion carved into features that were probably pretty when they weren't weighted down by stress and fear. Saw intelligence in eyes that had learned to expect disappointment. Saw strength in the set of her shoulders, the kind of strength that came from carrying too much for too long. I'm not sure, he admitted. It was the most honest thing he'd said all day. Elena grabbed her folder and opened the door, then paused. Thank you. Whatever your reasons are. Thank you. She was gone before he could respond, hurrying through the rain toward the building entrance. In the back seat, Ava pressed her face against the window, watching her mother disappear inside. Is Mommy going to get the job? She asked quietly. Mason looked at this small girl with her broken rabbit and her too big coat and her eyes that had seen too much loss. He could tell her the truth, that her mother was probably going to fail this interview like she'd probably failed others, that the system was rigged against people who showed up late with stress written across their faces, that life didn't care about rabbits or promises or little girls who believed their fathers were still somehow watching over them. Or he could lie. I hope so, he said. Ava smiled. Me too. Rosie gurgled from her car seat, and Ava immediately started making faces at her sister, coaxing giggles with the practiced ease of a kid who'd been playing this role for years. Mason's phone rang. Singapore investors, the screen said. He declined the call. Then he did something he hadn't done in longer than he could remember. He sat in his car with 2 children he didn't know, watching rain streak down windows, and waited. Just waited. Not for a meeting or a deal or a strategic advantage. Just for one exhausted woman to finish an interview she'd probably fail, so he could drive her and her daughters to a repair shop to fix a stuffed rabbit that couldn't matter less to him and meant everything to a little girl who still believed in promises. Ava's voice drifted from the back seat, soft and wondering. "Mister, do you have kids?" "A son, Noah. He's 8. "Does he go to our school?" "No, he goes to Ashworth Academy." "Oh." Ava processed this. "That's the fancy school. We can't go there because it costs too much money." "Ava," Mason said gently, "remember what your mom said about talking about money?" "Oh yeah, sorry." A pause. "Do you love your son?" The question hit Mason like a physical blow. "Do you love your son?" Of course he did. Obviously he did. What kind of question was that? Except, when was the last time he'd told Noah that? When was the last time they'd done something together that wasn't scheduled, coordinated through the nanny, optimized for developmental benefit? When was the last time Mason had looked at his son the way Elena looked at her daughters, like they were miracles instead of responsibilities? "Yes," he said, and his voice came out hoarse. "I love him very much." "You should tell him," Ava said seriously. "My mommy tells us every day. She says it's important because you never know when someone might go away forever like Daddy did." Mason closed his eyes. This child, this tiny, damaged, impossibly wise child, was teaching him things he should have known years ago. "You're right," he managed. "I should tell him more." "Today," Ava insisted. "You should tell him today." "Okay. Promise?" Mason looked at her in the rearview mirror. She was holding up her pinky finger, waiting. He'd sealed billion-dollar deals with handshakes. He'd signed contracts worth more than this car, this building, more than most people would see in a lifetime. But he'd never made a promise quite like this. He reached back, his pinky linked with hers, small and fragile and absolutely unbreakable. "Promise," he said. Ava beamed, and Mason Reed, billionaire, divorced father, man who'd built an empire on logic and strategy and emotional distance, sat in his expensive car in the rain and realized something that terrified him. He'd stopped feeling empty. The numbness that had been his constant companion for years had cracked, just slightly, just enough to let something else in. Something warm and uncomfortable and utterly unwelcome. He felt something, and he had no idea what to do about it, except sit here and wait for a woman he barely knew to finish an interview that would probably lead nowhere, so he could help fix a toy that would fall apart again eventually anyway. It made no logical sense. It wouldn't appear on any spreadsheet. It couldn't be calculated or optimized or leveraged for strategic advantage, which meant by every measure Mason had ever used to evaluate his choices, it was completely pointless. And yet, when Elena emerged from the building at 3:17 p.m., her face tight with forced neutrality that screamed rejection, and climbed into the passenger seat without saying a word. When Ava asked brightly, "Did you get it, Mommy?" and Elena's mask cracked just enough to show the devastation underneath before she pulled it back together. When they drove to Mrs. Chen's repair shop, which did exist, Mason discovered, he'd just guessed the name and gotten lucky, and watched the elderly seamstress promise to fix the rabbit with care. When they finally pulled up outside Elena's apartment building, a rundown complex in a neighborhood Mason's GPS warned him about. And she tried one more time to offer him money for gas, and he refused. When Ava waved goodbye from the lobby window, still holding her rabbit, still smiling despite everything, Mason felt it all. The unfairness, the waste, the stupid, senseless cruelty of a world where children lost fathers and mothers lost jobs and broken toys seemed like catastrophes because sometimes they were all you had left. He felt it, and he couldn't stop feeling it even after he drove away, even after he picked up Noah from school, early for once, even after he sat across from his son at dinner that night and tried to figure out how to say, "I love you," to a child who looked at him like a stranger. "Dad?" Noah's voice was hesitant. "Are you okay?" "Yeah," Mason lied, then stopped. "No. Actually, I'm not sure." Noah's eyes widened. Mason never admitted uncertainty, never showed weakness. "What's wrong?" "Everything," Mason wanted to say. "I've built this perfect life that's completely empty, and I don't know how to fix it. And today I met a little girl who taught me more about love in 10 minutes than I've learned in years, and I'm terrified that I've already failed you the way I've failed at everything that actually matters." Instead, he said, "I love you, Noah. I don't say it enough, but I do. I love you so much." Noah stared at him, then quietly, "I love you too, Dad." They sat in awkward silence, neither knowing what to do with this sudden honesty. Finally, Noah asked, "Did something happen today?" Mason thought about Ava and Elena and Rosie, about a broken rabbit and a failed interview and a promise made with pinky fingers, about feeling something for the first time in years and not knowing if it was a beginning or an ending or both. "Yeah," he said. "Something happened." "What?" Mason looked at his son, really looked, the way he'd looked at Elena earlier, and saw a stranger, 8 years old, his own child. And Mason didn't know his favorite color, his favorite book, what he dreamed about at night or feared in the dark. He'd failed. Completely, utterly failed. But maybe... "I met someone today," Mason said slowly. "A little girl. She asked me to help fix something broken. Did you?" "I'm trying to." Noah tilted his head. "Just trying? That's not like you. You always know how to fix things." "Not this kind of thing." "What kind?" Mason looked at his son, this small person he'd created and then abandoned to nannies and schedules, and the kind of care that money could buy but love couldn't automate. "The important kind," he said, and meant it. That night, Mason couldn't sleep. He lay in his penthouse bedroom, custom mattress, thread count in the thousands, temperature controlled to optimize REM cycles, and stared at the ceiling while his mind refused to shut down. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Ava's face. That desperate hope when she'd asked him to fix the rabbit. That resignation when she thought he'd say no. The way she'd made him promise to tell Noah he loved him, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. At 2:47 a.m., he gave up and went to his home office. The floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Lake Michigan, black and endless under a cloudy sky. Rain had finally stopped, leaving the city slick and reflective, lights smearing across wet pavement. His laptop sat on the desk, closed. He'd brought it home intending to finish that email to Singapore. 3 days ago, it had seemed urgent, world-ending. Now it felt trivial. He opened it anyway. The cursor blinked in the empty space where brilliant strategy was supposed to appear. Mason's fingers hovered over the keys, but nothing came. His brain, the same brain that could see patterns in market data that others missed, that could predict consumer behavior with eerie accuracy, that had built an empire on being 3 steps ahead, couldn't form a single coherent sentence about investment projections. Because he kept thinking about $32,000. Elena's interview had been for $32,000 a year. Less than Mason spent on clothes, a rounding error in his quarterly taxes. She'd failed to get it. He'd seen it in her face when she came out of that building. The forced smile, the too bright voice when she told Ava, "It went fine, sweetie." The way her hand shook slightly when she buckled Rosie back into the car seat. She'd failed, and now she was back in that apartment building his GPS had warned him about, probably lying awake too, wondering how many more weeks before eviction, before the next crisis, before everything fell apart completely, and Mason had driven away. What else was he supposed to do? His phone buzzed on the desk, a message from his assistant. "Singapore is threatening to walk. They want a response by 9 a.m. Eastern, or they're going with Deloitte." Deloitte, his biggest competitor. This deal had been in the works for 7 months. Losing it would be a visible failure, the kind that made shareholders nervous and board members start whispering. Mason should care about that. He typed back, "Let them walk." The reply came fast. "Are you serious?" Was he? $70 million. 6 new positions for his team. Expansion into Asian markets he'd been targeting for 2 years. All of it gone because he couldn't focus, couldn't care, couldn't make himself pretend this mattered more than a broken stuffed rabbit and a woman trying to survive on job offers that never came through. "Dead serious," he typed. "We'll find other opportunities." He closed the laptop before his assistant could argue. The apartment was too quiet. It was always too quiet. 15,000 square feet of carefully designed space, and the only sound was the hum of expensive appliances and his own breathing. Noah was asleep down the hall, in a bedroom bigger than most people's living rooms. They'd eaten dinner together tonight, actually together, not just occupying the same space while Mason answered emails and Noah played on his tablet. They'd talked, sort of, awkwardly, like strangers trying to find common ground. "What did you do at school today?" Mason had asked. "Stuff." "What kind of stuff?" "I don't know, school stuff." It had felt like pulling teeth. But Mason had kept trying, kept asking questions, even stupid ones, even when Noah looked at him with confusion that bordered on suspicion, like he couldn't figure out why his father suddenly cared. Because a 5-year-old girl had asked if he loved his son, and Mason hadn't been able to answer without feeling like a liar. He stood up, walked to the window. Chicago spread out below him, millions of people sleeping in buildings that ranged from penthouses like his to apartments like Elena's. All of them living completely separate lives, separated by money and circumstance, and choices that compounded over years until the distance became impossible to cross. Except sometimes a little girl asked you to fix a rabbit, and suddenly the distance didn't seem so permanent. Mason pulled out his phone, opened his contacts, scrolled to a name he hadn't called in 6 months. Marcus Chen picked up on the 4th ring, voice rough with sleep. "This better be important, Reed. It's 3 in the morning. I need you to do something for me." "Now?" "First thing tomorrow. I need background on someone. Employment history, current situation, financial status, everything." A pause. "This a business thing?" "No." "Personal?" "I don't know what it is." Marcus was quiet for a moment. He'd worked as Mason's private investigator for 5 years, handling everything from due diligence on potential partners to tracking down information on competitors. He'd learned not to ask too many questions. "Name?" "Elena Brooks. 2 daughters, Ava and Rosie. Widow. Late husband was a firefighter, Station 47, died 4 years ago. Currently unemployed, lives somewhere on the south side." Mason rattled off what little he knew. "I want to know what she's up against." "You want financials?" "Everything, debt, income history, eviction status, whatever's relevant." "This is going to cost you." "I don't care." "Seriously, who is this woman?" Mason looked out at the city. "Someone who needs help." "And you're suddenly in the charity business?" "Apparently." Marcus laughed, dry and knowing. "You're going soft, Reed. Never thought I'd see it. Just get me the information." "Give me 12 hours. Mason hung up and immediately felt dirty. What was he doing? Running a background check on a woman who'd done nothing except accept a ride and try to survive? Invading her privacy because he couldn't stop thinking about the exhaustion in her face? This was wrong. He knew it was wrong. But he couldn't help someone if he didn't know what they needed, and Elena wouldn't tell him. Pride wouldn't let her. He'd seen that clearly enough, so he'd find out another way. His phone rang. He almost didn't answer. Unknown number, middle of the night. But something made him pick up. "Mr. Reed?" A woman's voice, professional but strained. "This is Mercy General Hospital. We have your son here." Mason's world tilted. "What?" "Noah Reed. He was brought in about 20 minutes ago. He's stable, but what happened?" Mason was already moving, grabbing his keys, his wallet. "Is he hurt?" "He's okay, Mr. Reed. Please don't panic. But he called 911 from your home, said he couldn't breathe, that his chest hurt. The paramedics thought it might be cardiac, but it appears to be..." Mason wasn't listening anymore. He was running for the elevator, phone pressed to his ear, terror flooding every nerve. Noah. His son. The hospital. Everything else, Elena, Singapore, the rabbit, all of it, disappeared into background noise as the only thing that had ever really mattered came into sharp, horrifying focus. The emergency room smelled like disinfectant and fear. Mason burst through the doors at 3:42 a.m., wild-eyed and breathing hard. The nurse at the desk took one look at him and said, "Noah Reed? Where is he?" "Bay 7. "He's fine, Mr. Reed. The doctor will..." Mason was already past her, following signs and instinct until he found Bay 7, and there, Osiki Sampotuonki. Noah sat on a hospital bed, small in a hospital gown, an oxygen monitor clipped to his finger. He looked up when Mason entered, and his face did something complicated. Relief and guilt, and something else Mason couldn't identify. "Dad?" Mason crossed the space in 3 steps and pulled his son into a hug that was probably too tight, too desperate. Noah stiffened in surprise, then slowly relaxed. "Are you okay? What happened? The hospital said you couldn't breathe." "I'm fine." Noah's voice was muffled against Mason's shoulder. I woke up and my chest felt weird and I got scared." A doctor appeared in the doorway, young and tired looking. "Mr. Reed?" "Dr. Patel, your son had a panic attack." "A what?" "Panic attack. His vitals are completely normal. No cardiac issues, no respiratory problems. But he experienced acute anxiety that manifested as physical symptoms: chest tightness, difficulty breathing, rapid heartbeat." Mason pulled back to look at Noah. "You had a panic attack?" Noah wouldn't meet his eyes. "I guess." "Why? What were you anxious about?" "I don't know." "Noah, I said I don't know." It came out sharp, defensive, then quieter. "You were acting weird at dinner. And then I heard you walking around late and talking on the phone, and you sounded upset, and I thought maybe something was wrong, and then I couldn't stop thinking about it, and my chest started hurting, and—" He stopped, breathing fast. "Hey!" Mason gripped his son's shoulders gently. "Look at me. Nothing's wrong. I'm fine. You're fine." "You're never home late," Noah said. "You're always working or in meetings or doing important stuff. But tonight you were home and you wanted to talk and you said you loved me, and it was weird, Dad. It was really weird." The words hit Mason like bullets. His son had a panic attack because Mason had come home early and tried to be a father. Because kindness from him was so unusual, it seemed like a crisis. Dr. Patel cleared his throat. "Mr. Reed, has Noah been seeing anyone? A therapist or counselor?" "Yes, Dr. Morrison. The school recommended it after the divorce." "When was his last appointment?" Mason opened his mouth, closed it. He had no idea. The nanny handled that. Melissa kept the schedule. He just signed the checks and assumed it was happening. "I don't know," he admitted. "Dad," Noah's voice was small. "I stopped going, like 4 months ago." "What? Why?" "Because you never asked about it anyway, and Mrs. Crawford, the nanny, kept forgetting to take me. So I just told her I didn't need to go anymore, and she said okay." Mason felt something crack inside his chest. Not break. Worse than that. Crumble. Like the foundation of a building giving way, taking everything above it down too. "Noah, It's fine." Noah looked away. "I'm fine. Everything's fine." But nothing was fine, and they both knew it. Dr. Patel stepped closer. "I'd like to keep him for observation for a few more hours, just to be safe. But Mr. Reed, your son needs support. Consistent support. Panic attacks in children Noah's age are often a response to instability or stress. He has everything he needs." "Does he?" The question hung in the air, sharp and accusatory. Mason looked at his son. Really looked. Saw the dark circles under his eyes that had probably been there for weeks. The way he held himself, tense and guarded. The expression that was trying so hard to be neutral, to not need anything, to not be a burden. 8 years old, and already learning that needing help meant being a problem. "Can we have a minute?" Mason asked the doctor. Dr. Patel nodded and left, pulling the curtain closed behind him. Mason sat on the edge of the hospital bed. Noah stayed silent, picking at the hospital bracelet on his wrist. "I'm sorry," Mason said finally. "For what?" "For not being there. For not knowing you stopped going to therapy. For making you feel like you couldn't tell me when something was wrong." "You're busy." Noah shrugged, but it was forced. "You have important stuff to do." "Nothing is more important than you." "That's not true." The simple honesty in those 3 words gutted Mason. "Yes, it is." "Then why are you never home? Why does Mrs. Crawford do everything? Why do you always look annoyed when the school calls about me?" Mason had no answer, or rather, he had too many answers, none of them good enough. "Because I don't know how to be a father. Because work is easy and you're hard. Because I'm terrified that if I try and fail, you'll hate me more than you already do." "I met a little girl today," Mason said instead. "She's 5. Her dad died 4 years ago, and she's got this stuffed rabbit he gave her, and the ear was falling off." Noah looked up, confused. "Okay." She asked me to help fix it, and I did. Or I helped her mom find someone who could, and on the way there she asked me if I loved you. Why would she ask that? I don't know. Kids ask weird questions, I guess. But I told her yes, and she said I should tell you. That I should tell you today, because her mom tells her and her sister every day, and she thinks that's important. Noah was quiet for a long time. Then, do you love me? More than anything in the world. Then why don't you act like it? And there it was, the real question, the one that mattered. Mason didn't have a good answer. He'd built an empire, solved impossible business problems, made decisions worth hundreds of millions of dollars, but he couldn't figure out how to show his own son that he mattered. Because I'm scared, he said finally. Of what? Of messing this up, of being a bad father, of you hating me. Noah stared at him. That's stupid. Yeah, it is. I don't hate you, Dad. I just wish you were around more. Like, actually around. Not just home, but still on your phone or computer or thinking about work. I know. So are you going to be? Mason thought about Singapore, about the deals waiting, the meetings scheduled, the empire that demanded constant attention. Then he thought about Ava, making him promise with a pinky swear. About Elena, trying to survive on $32,000 a year, while Mason threw away $70 million because he couldn't focus. About this small person in a hospital bed, asking for something so simple and so impossible. Just be there. Yes, Mason said. I'm going to try. Trying isn't the same as doing. I know, but it's a start. Noah considered this, then cautiously, can I come to work with you sometime? Like, see what you actually do all day? The request surprised Mason. You want to come to my office? I want to understand why it's more interesting than I am. The honesty was brutal and deserved. It's not, Mason said. It never has been. I've just been really bad at showing that. So, can I come? Yeah, tomorrow if you want. Or today, I guess, since it's almost morning. Noah's face brightened slightly. Not a smile, but close. Really? Really, you can see the boring meetings and the annoying phone calls and realize how much of my job is just pretending to know what I'm doing. That got an actual smile. Small, but real. They sat together in the curtained bay while machines beeped and hospital sounds filtered through thin walls. Mason kept his arm around his son, and Noah didn't pull away. Dad? Yeah? Who was the little girl? The one with the rabbit? Mason thought about how to explain Elena and Ava and the strange, uncomfortable feeling that had been growing in his chest since that morning in the cafe. Someone who needed help, he said finally, and who reminded me that sometimes helping people matters more than making money. Are you going to help them more? I don't know, maybe. You should. Noah leaned against him. I think it made you nicer. Mason laughed, surprised. I was mean before? Not mean, just far away, even when you were right there. Far away. That was exactly it. Mason had been far away from everything that mattered, hiding behind success and strategy and the comfortable numbness of caring about nothing except numbers on screens. Until a broken rabbit cracked something open. Dr. Patel returned around 5 a.m. and discharged Noah with instructions to follow up with his regular pediatrician and restart therapy. Mason signed papers, collected his son, and drove them both home through a city that was just starting to wake up. Noah fell asleep in the passenger seat, head against the window. Mason glanced over at him every few seconds, still half convinced this whole night was some kind of stress-induced hallucination. His son had called 911 because of a panic attack, because Mason had been nice to him. That was broken on a level Mason didn't know how to fix. But he had to try. His phone rang. Marcus. It's 5 in the morning, Mason said. You called me at 3. I figured you were in a rush. Marcus sounded wide awake, caffeinated. I got preliminary information on your Elena Brooks. Can it wait? Depends. How urgent is her situation? Why? Because she's about to be evicted. Notice was filed 3 days ago. She's got 2 weeks before the sheriff shows up. Mason's grip tightened on the wheel. How much does she owe? $2,800 in back rent, plus fees, probably $3,000 total. $3,000. Mason had watches worth more than that. What else? Credit cards maxed out. Student loans in forbearance that's about to expire. Car was repossessed 2 months ago. She's working through a temp agency but hasn't had steady placement in weeks. Last 3 job interviews all rejected her. She's applying for assistance programs, but nothing's come through yet. Marcus kept talking, laying out the details of Elena's financial collapse with clinical precision. Mason listened, building a picture in his head. She was drowning, not slowly, actively sinking, maybe days away from losing everything. The husband's death benefits, Mason asked, ran out 2 years ago. Life insurance was minimal. She got a settlement from the city, but it went to medical bills from his final hospitalization and funeral costs. She's been surviving on nothing for longer than seems possible. Kids? Ava starts kindergarten next year. Rosie's in subsidized daycare when Elena can afford it, which lately is never. School district isn't great. Neighborhood has issues. Mason knew the neighborhood. He'd seen it yesterday. Broken streetlights, buildings with security bars, the kind of place his GPS warned about. Anything else? She's smart, pulled her college transcripts. 3.7 GPA before she dropped out. Strong letters of recommendation. Every employer who let her go cited budget cuts or restructuring, nothing performance-related. She's not failing because she's incompetent. She's failing because the system's rigged. I didn't say that. But it's true. Marcus was quiet, then, yeah, it's true. What are you going to do about it? Mason looked at Noah, sleeping peacefully now. Thought about Ava with her broken rabbit and her pinky promises. About Elena's forced smile and shaking hands. I don't know yet. Reed, whatever you're thinking, just send me the full report. Bill the company. He hung up before Marcus could argue. $3,000 to save Elena from eviction. Pocket change, he could write that check right now, have it delivered today, solve the immediate crisis without her even knowing where it came from. But that didn't fix the underlying problem. She'd still be unemployed, still struggling, still one emergency away from the next disaster. She needed more than money. She needed what she'd asked for in that cafe, one real opportunity. Mason pulled into his building's garage, collected Noah, carried him upstairs. The apartment was still too big, too quiet, too much empty space for 2 people who barely knew each other. But maybe that could change. He put Noah to bed, then went to his office and opened his laptop. Not to finish the Singapore email. That was done, dead, gone. Instead, he pulled up his company's organizational chart, looked at positions, departments, needs. His company was growing fast. Too fast. The expansion into new markets meant new complexity, new demands. He needed someone to manage operations, coordinate between departments, handle the 1,000 small crises that ate up his time. He'd been planning to hire someone for months, had even posted the job listing. Executive Operations Manager. 60,000 starting, benefits, room for growth. The application sat in his HR system, unreviewed. He'd been too busy to look at them. Mason opened the job posting and read the requirements he'd approved without really thinking about them. Bachelor's degree required. 5 years experience in operations management. Proven track record in corporate environments. Standard requirements. Reasonable requirements. Requirements that automatically excluded someone like Elena, whose degree was unfinished and whose work history was full of gaps in entry-level positions. Requirements that prioritized credentials over capability. Mason highlighted them all and hit delete. Then he rewrote the posting from scratch. When he finished, the sun was coming up over Lake Michigan, and Mason had made a decision that was either the smartest or stupidest thing he'd ever done. He was going to offer Elena a job, not out of pity, not as charity, but because she was exactly what his company needed, even if her resume didn't show it. He'd seen her with her daughters, seen how she managed chaos with limited resources, seen the intelligence in her eyes, the determination, the strength it took to keep fighting when everything was stacked against you. Those weren't things you could teach, and they were worth more than any degree. His phone buzzed, a message from Melissa. "You're supposed to be at the office in an hour, board meeting at 9. Should I tell them you're running late?" Mason looked at Noah, asleep down the hall, at the rewritten job posting on his screen, at the city waking up beyond his windows. He thought about what mattered, what actually, genuinely mattered when you stripped away everything else. "Cancel it," he typed back. "Cancel everything today. I'm taking my son to work." "What? The board specifically requested?" "I don't care. Cancel it." He sent the message, then turned off his phone before anyone could argue. For the first time in years, Mason Reed was going to put his actual life before his business life. And it felt terrifying and liberating in equal measure. Noah woke up around 8, confused to find himself home instead of still at the hospital. "Dad?" Mason appeared in his doorway. "Hey, how do you feel?" "Okay, I guess. Tired." "Want to skip school today?" Noah sat up, suspicious. "Why?" "Because I promised you could come to work with me. And because I think we both need a day to just figure things out." "You're really taking the day off?" "Not exactly. I'm bringing work home. Or bringing home to work. I haven't figured out which yet." Noah smiled uncertainly. "You're being weird again." "Yeah, I am. Get dressed. I'll make breakfast." "You're going to make breakfast?" "I'm going to try. Fair warning, I might burn it." Mason did, in fact, burn the first batch of pancakes. And the second. But the third attempt came out almost edible, and Noah ate them without complaining while Mason tried to remember the last time they'd had breakfast together that wasn't cereal grabbed on the way out the door. "Dad?" Noah said through a mouthful of slightly charred pancake. "Yeah? Are you really going to be different now, or is this just like temporary because I freaked you out last night?" The question was fair. Mason had made promises before, had tried to change before, had failed before. "I don't know," he said honestly. "I want to be different, but wanting isn't enough. I have to actually do it, and I'm probably going to mess up sometimes." "That's okay," Noah shrugged. "I mess up all the time." "You're 8. "So? You're old and you still mess up," Mason laughed. "I'm 32. That's not old." "It's older than Mom." And just like that, the mood shifted. Mason's ex-wife was a subject they didn't discuss often. She'd moved to California with her new husband, visited Noah on holidays, sent expensive gifts to compensate for absence. "Yeah," Mason said quietly. "It is." They finished breakfast in silence that wasn't quite comfortable, but wasn't hostile either. Then Mason's landline rang. He almost didn't answer. Who even used landlines anymore? But something made him pick up. "Mr. Reed?" A woman's voice, tentative. "This is Elena Brooks. I got your number from the repair shop. Mrs. Chen. I hope that's okay." Mason's heart rate kicked up. "Of course. Is everything all right? Is the rabbit?" "The rabbit's fine. She fixed him perfectly. That's actually why I'm calling. To say thank you, and to ask how much I owe you for the repair. Mrs. Chen wouldn't tell me the cost. She said you'd already taken care of it." Mason had done exactly that. Had gone back to the shop yesterday evening, paid for the repair, told Mrs. Chen not to mention it. "It wasn't much," he lied. "Mr. Reed, I can't accept charity. Please tell me what it cost." $15. Another lie. It had been 80, but Elena's pride was already fragile enough. Silence on the other end, then, 15? "Mrs. Chen gave me a discount. We're old friends." That's very kind. I'll bring you the money today if you tell me where." "Don't worry about it. I have to worry about it. I can't just take money from a stranger. We're not strangers anymore. We're people who drove through rain together and helped fix a rabbit." He could almost hear her smile through the phone. "That's a weird way to make friends." "Most of my friends came from business conferences. This is an improvement." Elena laughed, and something in Mason's chest loosened. "I suppose that's fair, but still, I owe you. For the repair, for the ride, for being kind when you didn't have to be." "You don't owe me anything." "Then let me buy you coffee, as a thank you." The offer surprised him. "You don't have to do that." "I want to, please. It's the least I can do." Mason looked at Noah, who was watching him with interest. Thought about the job posting sitting on his laptop. About the decision he'd made at dawn. "Actually," he said slowly, "I was hoping to talk to you about something. Coffee would be perfect." "Really? Okay. When? Are you free today?" A pause. Yes. I don't have any interviews scheduled." "Where?" "The same cafe, around 11. "I'll be there." She hung up, and Mason stood there holding the phone, wondering what the hell he was doing. Noah was staring at him. "Was that the rabbit girl's mom?" "Yeah." "Are you going to help them more?" Mason set down the phone. "I think so." "Good." Noah finished his pancake. "Can I come?" To coffee with Elena? You said I could come to work. Isn't she work now? Mason couldn't quite follow the logic, but he also couldn't argue with it. Sure, he said. You can come. And Noah smiled, actually smiled, like maybe his father wasn't completely hopeless after all. The cafe looked different in daylight, less like a refuge from the storm and more like what it actually was, a slightly run-down coffee shop in a neighborhood that had seen better decades. The espresso machine wheezed instead of hummed. The tables wobbled. Someone had tried to fix the torn vinyl on the booth seats with duct tape. Mason noticed all of it this time because he wasn't hiding in his usual corner, staring at nothing. He was standing near the entrance with Noah, who kept fidgeting with his jacket zipper. You're nervous, Noah observed. I'm not nervous. You keep checking your phone every 30 seconds. Mason pocketed his phone. I'm just making sure we didn't miss her. She's not even late yet. We're early. They were. By 20 minutes. Mason had miscalculated traffic, or maybe he'd driven faster than necessary. Or maybe Noah was right and he was nervous. The door chimed. Elena walked in, and Mason's first thought was that she looked different too. Less exhausted, maybe. Or just different clothes. Jeans that actually fit, a sweater that wasn't threadbare, hair pulled back in a way that looked intentional instead of desperate. Then he saw Ava and Rosie behind her, and his second thought was that he should have clarified this was a business meeting. But Ava spotted Noah immediately, and her whole face lit up. You brought your son! Noah shrank slightly behind Mason. He wasn't good with other kids. The expensive private school had taught him to be polite, but not friendly, careful, but not open. This is Noah, Mason said. Noah, this is Ava and Rosie. Hi, Noah mumbled. Ava was undeterred. Want to see my rabbit? Mr. Chen fixed him perfectly. Look, his ear's all better. She thrust the rabbit toward Noah, who took it cautiously and examined the repair with the seriousness of an art appraiser. That's good stitching, he said finally. I know! And she put extra thread inside so it won't fall off again, even if I hug him really tight. Elena reached them, shifting Rosie on her hip. I hope it's okay I brought them. My neighbor who usually watches them had a doctor's appointment and I couldn't afford... She stopped. Sorry, you don't need my childcare logistics. It's fine, Mason said. More than fine. They stood there awkwardly until a waitress appeared, the same one from yesterday, who looked at Mason with recognition and something like approval. Your usual table's open, she said, gesturing to the corner booth. Mason started to correct her. This wasn't that kind of meeting, but Elena was already herding the girls toward it, and Noah followed without prompting, pulled along by Ava's chatter about rabbits and rain and something that had happened at the park last week. Mason ordered coffee. Elena asked for tea. The kids got hot chocolate that arrived with slightly deflated whipped cream. So, Elena said once they were settled, the girls at one end of the table with Noah awkwardly between them, the adults at the other. You said you wanted to talk about something. This was it. The moment Mason had been rehearsing in his head all morning. He'd prepared a speech, professional, clear, business appropriate. An offer that made sense on paper even if the reasoning behind it didn't. What came out instead was, are you really about to be evicted? Elena's face went blank. What? Your apartment. I heard you're behind on rent. The temperature at the table dropped about 20 degrees. Elena set down her tea carefully, deliberately, like she was concentrating very hard on not throwing it at him. How would you know that? Mason had known this would be a problem, had known it the second he asked Marcus to dig into her background. But he'd done it anyway because he couldn't help someone if he didn't understand the situation. I have resources, he said, people who can find information. You ran a background check on me. Not a question. A statement, flat and cold. Yes. Why? Because I wanted to help and you wouldn't tell me what you needed. Elena stood up so fast her chair scraped against the floor. Ava and Noah both looked over, startled. Mommy? Ava's voice was small. It's fine, baby. Keep playing. Elena's voice was steel wrapped in forced calm. Then to Mason. Outside. Now. She didn't wait for a response, just turned and walked toward the door. Mason followed, feeling Noah's confused stare burning into his back. The November air hit cold after the cafe's warmth. Elena walked a few steps away from the windows, arms crossed tight against her chest, and whirled on him. What the hell is wrong with you? I'm trying to help by invading my privacy? By digging through my finances like I'm some kind of charity case you need to evaluate? That's not what this is. Then what is it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like some rich guy decided to play savior and ran a background check to make sure I'm worthy of his help. Elena, it's Ms. Brooks. We're not friends. We're strangers who shared a car ride, and apparently that gave you the right to investigate me like I'm a potential employee or a security risk or... She stopped. Wait, is that what this is? You think I'm going to rob you or something? Con you? No, that's not... I would never... Then why? Mason didn't have a good answer. Everything he'd planned to say evaporated under her anger, which was justified and fierce, and somehow made him respect her even more. Because I wanted to know how bad it was, he said finally. Because you weren't going to tell me. Because people who need help the most are usually the ones who refuse to ask for it. So you just decided to take that choice away from me? I made a mistake. Yeah, you did. They stood in tense silence. A bus rumbled past. Someone shouted down the block. The city moved around them, indifferent. I have a job offer, Mason said quietly. Elena laughed, bitter. Of course you do. Let me guess. You need a housekeeper? Someone to organize your rich guy life while you feel good about helping the poor widow? Operations manager. My company. $60,000 starting salary, full benefits, potential for growth. That stopped her. What? I need someone to coordinate between departments, manage workflow, handle logistics. Someone organized, capable of working under pressure, good with people. You don't know if I'm any of those things. I watched you manage 2 kids, a broken-down car situation, a job interview you were late for, and a broken toy that mattered more than all of it combined. You held it together when everything was falling apart. That's exactly what I need. Elena stared at him like he'd grown a second head. You can't offer someone a $60,000 job because you watched them have a bad day. Why not? Because that's not how jobs work. There are applications, interviews, qualifications. I don't care about qualifications. I care about capability. I didn't finish my degree. I know. I haven't held a position for more than 8 months in 4 years. I know that too. Then you also know I'm a terrible hire. I'm unreliable. I can't commit. Every employer I've had has let me go. Because of budget cuts and downsizing, not performance issues. Elena shook her head. This is insane. You don't just offer people jobs like this. There are rules, processes. It's my company. I make the rules. And what happens when I fail? When I can't handle it and you realize you made a mistake hiring me out of pity? First, it's not pity. Second, if it doesn't work out, we'll deal with it then, but I don't think you'll fail. Based on what? One car ride? Mason thought about how to explain it. The way she'd held herself together in that cafe while her daughter cried and her life crumbled. The intelligence he'd seen flash in her eyes when she thought no one was watching. The strength it took to keep showing up to interviews when rejection was guaranteed. Based on the fact that you're still fighting, he said, most people would have given up by now. But you keep showing up. You keep trying. That's worth more than any resume. Elena's anger wavered, replaced by something more complicated. Why are you doing this? Because my son had a panic attack last night. The non sequitur threw her. What? He woke up scared and called 911 because his chest hurt. Turned out to be anxiety. The doctor asked when his last therapy appointment was, and I couldn't answer because I didn't know. I've been so focused on building my company, making money, being successful, that I forgot to actually be a father. Mason gestured back toward the cafe where Noah sat with the girls. Yesterday, your daughter asked me if I loved my son. And I realized I couldn't remember the last time I told him. The last time I was actually present instead of just physically there. You're surviving on nothing and still showing up for your kids every single day. I make millions and I can't even manage that. That's not a reason to hire me. No. But it's why I'm asking. Because you reminded me that success doesn't mean anything if you're failing at what actually matters. And maybe helping you is selfish. Maybe I'm trying to fix something in myself by fixing your situation. But the job offer is real. The position exists. I need someone to fill it, and I think you'd be good at it. Elena wrapped her arms tighter around herself. 60,000? Starting, raises based on performance. Benefits? Health, dental, vision, 401k matching, 3 weeks vacation. Why? Because that's standard for the position. No, why me? Really? There have to be hundreds of qualified applicants. Mason could have lied, could have given her a business justification that made sense on paper. Instead, he told the truth. Because Ava asked me to help fix something broken. And I'm starting to think she didn't just mean the rabbit. Elena's eyes filled with tears. She blinked them back angrily. That's manipulative. I know. You can't just fix people like they're broken toys. I'm not trying to fix you, I'm offering you a job. It feels like the same thing. It's not. You're not broken. You're drowning. There's a difference. A tear escaped, tracking down her cheek. She wiped it away roughly. I can't afford to hope this is real. It's real. And if I say yes? If I take this job and it turns out you're crazy, or this is some weird power trip where I actually can't do it, then we figure it out, together, like adults. Elena laughed through tears. I don't even know what an operations manager does. Neither did the last person I hired for the role. She figured it out. What happened to her? Got recruited by Google. I gave her a glowing recommendation. Elena shook her head, but she was almost smiling now. This is insane. Probably. I should say no. Probably. I need to think about it. Okay. They stood there while the moment stretched out. A car alarm went off somewhere. The cafe door chimed as someone left. How long do I have? Elena asked finally. As long as you need. But for what it's worth, your eviction notice said 2 weeks, so maybe not longer than that. The reminder of reality crashed back in. Elena's face hardened. You really did dig into everything. I'm sorry about that. I should have asked first. Yes, you should have. I was trying to help. Help requires consent, Mr. Reed. Mason. Please call me Mason. I'll call you whatever I want. But there was less heat in it now. More exhaustion than anger. Mason pulled out his wallet, extracted a business card, and held it out. My direct line, call me when you decide, or if you need anything before then. Elena took it, studied it like it might be a trick. And if I say no, then I wish you the best, and we part as people who once helped fix a rabbit together. That simple? That's simple. She pocketed the card. I need to get back to my daughters. Of course. They walked back inside together. The table was chaos. Noah was showing Ava something on his phone while Rosie systematically destroyed a napkin into confetti. The hot chocolate cups were empty. Someone had ordered cookies without asking. Ava looked up when they returned. Mommy, are you and Mr. Mason done talking? For now, baby. Good, because Noah's phone has games and he's letting me try one, but I keep dying and it's really hard. Noah actually looked engaged, explaining something about timing and patterns. Mason hadn't seen him interact with another kid like this in months, maybe years. Elena gathered her daughters, collected the rabbit, helped Rosie into her coat. The whole time she didn't look at Mason. When they were ready to leave, Ava stopped and held up her pinky finger toward Noah. You have to promise to play again sometime. Noah glanced at Mason, uncertain. Mason nodded. Okay, Noah said, linking pinkies with her. I promise. Ava beamed. Then she turned to Mason and held up her pinky again. And you have to promise to help my mommy, because she's sad a lot and she tries to hide it, but I can tell. And I think you can make her less sad. The entire cafe seemed to go quiet. Elena's face flushed. Ava, that's not... We don't ask people to... Promise, Ava insisted, pinky still extended toward Mason. Mason looked at Elena, who was mortified, at Ava, who was completely serious, at Noah, who was watching with interest. He linked his pinky with Ava's tiny one. I promise to try, he said. Good. Ava released him and grabbed her mother's hand. Okay, we can go now. Elena managed a tight, thank you for the tea, before shepherding the girls toward the door. Mason watched them leave, watched Elena pause at the corner outside, pull out his business card, and stare at it before tucking it back into her pocket. Then they were gone. Noah slid over to sit next to Mason. Did you offer her mom a job? How did you know? I heard you talking outside. The window was open. Of course it was. Yeah, I did. Is she going to take it? I don't know. She should. She seems nice. And Ava says their apartment is really small and kind of scary at night. Ava told you that? She tells me everything. She talks a lot. Noah paused. I like her, though. She's not mean like the kids at my school. Mason filed that piece of information away for later. You think I did the right thing? Offering her mom a job? Noah considered it seriously. I think you did a weird thing, but maybe weird is good sometimes. You're different when you're around them. Different how? Less, I don't know. Less like you're somewhere else even when you're right here. Present. Noah meant present, the same thing he'd said in the hospital. Is that good? Yeah, Dad, it's good. They sat together while the cafe filled up with the lunch rush. Mason should have been at his office. Should have been managing the fallout from canceled meetings and ignored calls. Should have been doing 100 things that were supposedly more important than sitting in a rundown cafe with his son, drinking bad coffee and wondering if a woman he barely knew would call. But he wasn't. And for the first time in years, that felt okay. His phone buzzed. Melissa, probably with a list of emergencies that weren't actually emergencies. Mason silenced it without looking. Want to get lunch? He asked Noah. Like, just us? Yeah, just us. Noah's smile was worth every canceled meeting in the world. Yeah, I want to. They ended up at a burger place Noah chose, nothing fancy, plastic booths and laminate tables and a jukebox in the corner that still somehow worked. Noah ordered a bacon cheeseburger and actually ate most of it instead of picking at his food while staring at a screen. They talked. Actually talked. About school, which Noah hated more than Mason had realized. About the panic attack, which Noah admitted had been building for weeks. About the divorce, which Noah said he barely remembered now except for the fighting. Do you miss Mom? Mason asked, and immediately regretted it. But Noah just shrugged. Sometimes. But she's happier now. With Greg, and it's better when she's happy. What about me? Am I happier now? Noah studied him seriously. I don't know, are you? Mason thought about it. Yesterday morning, he'd been numb, empty, going through motions because the alternative was stopping, and stopping meant feeling things he'd worked hard to bury. Today he felt anxious, uncertain, worried about whether Elena would call, whether he'd done the right thing, whether any of this would work. But he also felt alive. I think I might be, he said, or at least less unhappy. That's a weird answer. It's a weird situation. They finished eating and drove around the city for a while. No destination, just moving through space together. Mason pointed out buildings he'd consulted for, projects that had made him money. Noah pointed out places he wished he could go but never had. The Science Museum, the aquarium, Navy Pier. Why haven't we gone, Mud? Mason asked. Because you're always working. Want to go now? Noah's eyes went wide. Really? Why not? So they spent the afternoon at the Museum of Science and Industry, wandering through exhibits, watching Noah light up at the robot display and the submarine tour. Mason's phone buzzed constantly. He ignored it. Around 4, when they were looking at the coal mine exhibit, Noah said casually, You know she's going to say yes, right? Who? Elena, Ava's mom. She's going to take the job. How do you know? Because she has to. You said she's getting evicted, and Ava says they're really scared, so she'll say yes because she doesn't have a choice. That's not how I want her to make the decision. But it's how she'll make it. Adults always do what they have to, not what they want to. Noah said it matter-of-factly, like he'd learned this truth a long time ago. You work even when you hate it. Mom moved to California even though she likes Chicago. People do stuff because they have to. Mason wanted to argue, wanted to say that wasn't true, that people had choices, that circumstances didn't dictate everything. But Noah was right. Elena would say yes, not because she believed in the opportunity, but because she was desperate. And Mason had leveraged that desperation, even if he told himself he was helping. The realization sat heavy in his chest. If she says yes, Mason said slowly, and she hates it, if she feels trapped or obligated, or like she can't leave even if she wants to, that's my fault. Yeah, probably. Noah moved on to the next exhibit. But isn't that better than being evicted? Was it? Mason wasn't sure anymore. They got home around 6. Mrs. Crawford, the nanny, was waiting in the lobby, frantic. Mr. Reed, I've been calling for hours. The school said Noah was absent, and I didn't know where you were, and I took him out for the day, Mason said. I should have called. That's my fault. Mrs. Crawford blinked at him. In 5 years, Mason had never once taken Noah out of school unexpectedly, had never broken the carefully maintained schedule. Oh, well, as long as he's safe, I'll be going then. Actually, Mrs. Crawford, we need to talk about your schedule. My schedule? I'm going to be around more, taking Noah to school, picking him up, spending evenings with him. I'll still need you for backup in emergencies, but not daily. The nanny's face went through several expressions. Oh, I see. Am I being let go? No, but your hours will be reduced. I'll make sure you're compensated for the transition. Right, of course, that's good. Children need their parents. There was something pointed in the way she said it, something that suggested she'd been thinking this for a while but couldn't say it. After she left, Noah said, You made her uncomfortable. I know. Good. She's kind of mean when you're not around. What? Not mean, just she doesn't really like being with me. I can tell. She's always on her phone or watching TV. She's just there because it's her job. Mason felt that familiar crack in his chest again. Why didn't you tell me? I did. Like a year ago. You said she came with excellent references. Mason didn't remember that conversation. Couldn't even picture it. But he believed Noah completely. I'm sorry, he said. It's okay. You're fixing it now. They ordered pizza for dinner, Noah's choice again. Sat on the floor in the living room because Noah said the table was too formal. Watched a movie Noah picked that Mason would have never chosen. Some animated thing about feelings. Halfway through, Mason's phone rang. Unknown number. He almost ignored it, but something made him answer. Mr. Reed? Elena's voice, tight with tension. It's Elena Brooks. Mason's heart kicked into overdrive. Hi, yes. Hold on 1 second. He paused the movie. Noah looked at him questioningly. Mason mouthed Ava's mom, and Noah nodded, suddenly very interested. Mason walked into the kitchen for privacy. I'm here. Sorry about that. Is this a bad time? No, not at all. What's up? Silence for a beat. Then, I want to accept your job offer. Relief and guilt hit Mason simultaneously. Okay, that's great. But I have conditions. Okay. First, this is a real job, not charity disguised as employment. I work, I get paid. If I can't do it, you fire me. No pity, no special treatment. Agreed. Second, if this doesn't work out, if I fail or you realize you made a mistake, I need at least 30 days' notice, so I have time to find something else before we're homeless. The word homeless hung in the air like smoke. Agreed, Mason said quietly. Third, I don't want anyone at your company knowing how we met. I don't want to be the charity case the boss hired. I want to be judged on my work. Fair. I'll say you came through a referral. And fourth, she hesitated. I need an advance just for the first month's rent. I'll pay it back slowly out of my paychecks, but I need to handle the eviction notice this week, or this done. I'll have a check ready tomorrow. Mr. Reed, Mason. This feels too easy, like there's a catch I'm not seeing. Mason understood. Desperation made you suspicious of good fortune because good fortune was usually a trap. No catch, he said. Just a job. One you'll probably be better at than you think. When do I start? Monday? That gives you a few days to sort out childcare, and I can start tomorrow. Elena, you don't have to. Yes, I do. The faster I start, the faster I prove I can actually do this. Tomorrow, please. Mason thought about his office. The chaos waiting there after a day of ignored calls and canceled meetings. The board members who'd be furious. The investors who'd feel slighted. Walking Elena into that environment on her first day would be brutal. But she was right. Waiting wouldn't make it easier. Tomorrow, he agreed. 9 a.m. I'll text you the address. Okay, thank you. I don't know what else to say, except thank you. You don't have to thank me. Just show up ready to work. I will. I promise. She hung up, and Mason stood in his kitchen staring at his phone, wondering if he'd just made the best or worst decision of his career. Noah appeared in the doorway. She said yes? She said yes. Are you happy about that? Mason considered it. I'm terrified. Why? Because if this doesn't work, I'll have made everything worse. She's counting on this. Her daughters are counting on this. And I have no idea if I can actually deliver. Noah walked over and hugged him, just walked right up and wrapped his arms around Mason's waist. Mason stood frozen for a second, then hugged back. You'll figure it out, Noah said, voice muffled against Mason's shirt. You're good at figuring things out. Not always. More than you think. They stood like that for a while, father and son, both scared and hopeful in equal measure. Finally, Noah pulled back. Can we finish the movie? Yeah, let's finish the movie. They went back to the living room, to the pizza and the animated feelings and the strange new normal they were building together. And Mason tried not to think about tomorrow, when he'd have to walk Elena into his office and hope that this insane decision, this leap of faith based on a broken rabbit and a little girl's pinky promise, wouldn't destroy them both. But he couldn't quite shake the feeling that he'd just set something in motion that would change everything. For better or worse, he'd find out soon enough. Elena stood outside the glass tower at 8:47 a.m., 13 minutes early, staring up at the building that housed Reed Consulting Group like it might collapse if she stepped inside. She'd been awake since 4, had changed outfits 6 times before settling on the only blazer she owned that didn't have a visible stain, paired with pants she'd ironed 3 times because her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Had dropped the girls at her neighbor's apartment with promises she'd be back by 6, promises she wasn't sure she could keep because she had no idea what this job actually entailed. Her phone buzzed. Mason, you don't have to stand outside. Come up. 14th floor. Elena looked around, confused, then spotted the security camera above the entrance. He was watching. Of course he was watching. She pushed through the revolving door into a lobby that screamed money. Marble floors, abstract art that probably cost more than her annual salary, a security desk staffed by 2 men in suits that fit better than anything she'd ever owned. Elena Brooks, she told them. I'm here for Reed Consulting. One of them checked a tablet. You're on the list. 14th floor. Elevators are to your right. She felt their eyes follow her as she crossed to the elevators, felt the judgment in their professional neutrality. They knew. They could tell just by looking at her that she didn't belong here. The elevator was empty except for her reflection in the polished brass walls. She looked terrified. Small, like a kid playing dress-up in her mother's clothes. The doors opened on 14 and Elena stepped into chaos. The office was open plan, all glass walls and standing desks, and people moving with the kind of purposeful energy that came from knowing exactly what they were doing. Phones rang. Someone was arguing about quarterly projections. A woman rushed past carrying a stack of folders that looked ready to avalanche. No one noticed Elena. She stood there, frozen, until a voice behind her said, You must be the new hire? Elena turned to find a woman in her 50s, gray hair cut sharp, eyes that missed nothing. Yes, Elena Brooks. I'm supposed to start today. Melissa Porter. I keep Mason's life from falling apart, which is a full-time job, and then some. She extended a hand. Elena shook it, grateful when Melissa didn't comment on the nervous sweat. Mason's in his office. Through there. Last door on the left. Fair warning, he's dealing with some unhappy board members right now, so you might be walking into a war zone. Should I wait? Probably. But he told me to send you in the second you arrived, so... Melissa shrugged. Your funeral. Elena made her way through the maze of desks, hyper-aware of people glancing up, assessing, dismissing. She reached the glass-walled office at the end and knocked softly on the doorframe. Mason looked up from behind a desk covered in papers and 3 separate laptops. He was on the phone, and his expression was tight with barely controlled frustration. I understand your concerns, Richard, but the decision is made. We're pursuing other opportunities. A pause. No, I'm not discussing this further. The Singapore deal is dead. Move on. He hung up without saying goodbye and immediately looked at Elena. You came. You sound surprised. Honestly, I am a little. He stood, gestured to a chair across from his desk. Sit. Please. We need to talk before I throw you into the fire. Elena sat, gripping her bag like a life preserver. Through the glass walls, she could see people trying not to obviously stare. Is everyone always watching you? She asked. Probably. I own the company. Comes with the territory. Mason rubbed his face. Okay, full disclosure. Things are a mess right now. I canceled a major deal yesterday, which pissed off half my investors. I've been ignoring emails and calls. My board thinks I'm having a breakdown, and I'm about to walk you into the middle of it and pretend I know what I'm doing. That's not a great sales pitch for my first day. I know, but I promised you honesty, so there it is. This job is going to be harder than I made it sound. Elena had expected this, had waited for the catch, the moment where the too good to be true revealed itself as exactly that. What do you actually need me to do? She asked. Mason gestured at the chaos beyond his office walls. See all of that? That's 15 different departments trying to coordinate and failing. We've got consultants working on projects that overlap without knowing it. Reports that should take 2 days taking 2 weeks because information gets lost between teams. Client meetings that get double booked. Deliverables that miss deadlines because nobody's tracking them. You need project management. I need someone who can see the whole picture and make sure the pieces actually connect. Someone who can wrangle chaos into something functional. He looked at her directly. I think you can do that. Based on what exactly? Based on the fact that you've been managing chaos with zero resources for 4 years. You've kept your family functioning on nothing. This is the same thing, just with a budget and people who get paid to listen to you. Elena wanted to believe him, wanted to believe she could walk into this gleaming office and just know what to do. But wanting wasn't enough. I don't have experience with corporate systems, she said. I don't know your software, your protocols, any of it. You'll learn. And honestly, half our systems are broken anyway. You might end up fixing them instead of adapting to them. Mason, Ishian, Elena. He leaned forward. I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm asking you to try. Show up, observe, ask questions, and start connecting dots. That's it. First week is just learning the landscape. And if I can't, then we figure out what you can do instead. But let's not decide you'll fail before you even start. There was something in his voice that reminded Elena of Derek. Her husband had been good at that, seeing potential in her that she couldn't see herself, believing in her even when evidence suggested he shouldn't. It had been 4 years since anyone looked at her that way. Okay, she said quietly. Where do I start? Mason's expression shifted to relief so visible it was almost embarrassing. Staff meeting in 20 minutes, conference room B. I'll introduce you, explain your role, and then you can just observe. Get a feel for how things work, or don't work in most cases. And after the meeting? After that, you're on your own. I'll be dealing with damage control from Singapore. Melissa will get you set up with a desk, computer, access to systems. He paused. This is going to be overwhelming. My life is already overwhelming. This is just a different kind. Fair point. Someone knocked on the glass. Melissa pointing at her watch meaningfully. Mason nodded. That's my 5-minute warning. Meeting's about to start. He stood. Elena followed. You ready for this? No, she thought, not even close. Sure, she said. The conference room was already packed when they arrived. 20-some people crammed around a table built for 15, the overflow standing along the walls. Conversations died as Mason entered with Elena behind him. Morning, everyone, Mason said, moving to the head of the table. Before we dive in, I want to introduce Elena Brooks. She's joining us as operations manager, effective immediately. Elena tried to smile. It probably looked more like a grimace. A man in his 40s, expensive suit, wedding ring that cost more than Elena's car used to, spoke up. Operations manager? Since when do we have that position? Since I created it yesterday, David. We need better coordination between departments. Elena's going to handle that. What are her qualifications? The question hung in the air, sharp and challenging. Elena felt 20 pairs of eyes turn to her, assessing, judging. Mason's expression went cold. Her qualifications are that I hired her. That's all the qualification anyone in this room needs to care about. With all due respect, David, I'm going to stop you right there. Elena is here because I believe she can help this company run better. If you have a problem with that, we can discuss it after the meeting. Otherwise, let's move on. The silence was hostile. Elena wanted to sink through the floor. The meeting proceeded and Elena tried to follow along. They discussed client accounts, project timelines, resource allocation. People threw around acronyms and internal references she didn't understand. Someone presented a slide deck about market penetration strategies that might as well have been in another language. She took notes anyway, writing down terms to look up later, trying to map the relationships between people and departments. Halfway through, a woman around Elena's age raised her hand. Mason, about the Hendricks account. We're 3 weeks behind schedule because marketing hasn't delivered assets and product development keeps changing specifications. Nobody's coordinating. That's exactly the kind of thing Elena will be handling, Mason said. Talk to her after this. Work out a solution. See you. The woman, Sarah, according to the nameplate in front of her, looked at Elena with skepticism. No offense, but we've been dealing with this for 2 months. What's she going to do that we haven't already tried? Elena spoke before she could stop herself. What have you tried? Sarah blinked. What? You said you've tried things. What were they? I've emailed both departments, called meetings, escalated to their managers. And nobody responded? They respond. They just don't actually do anything. Everyone's too busy with their own projects. Elena recognized this problem. It was the same thing that happened with utility companies when you were behind on bills. Everyone was sympathetic. Everyone promised action. Nothing changed because nobody had actual authority or incentive to fix it. What if we made someone accountable? Elena suggested. Not a department, a specific person. Someone whose job performance review depends on these 2 departments coordinating. Sarah frowned. Who would that be? Me, apparently. Elena looked at Mason. Right? That's what operations manager means? Mason's expression was unreadable. Yeah, that's exactly what it means. Then I'll handle it. Give me both department heads' contact info. I'll set up a meeting today, create a timeline, and make sure someone's tracking deliverables. Elena had no idea if she could actually do any of that, but she'd run a household on no money and 2 small children. She'd coordinated firefighter schedules and family emergencies and Derek's complicated shift rotations. This was just a different kind of chaos. Sarah studied her for a moment, then, unexpectedly, smiled. Okay, I'll send you everything after this. The meeting continued. Elena spoke up twice more, asking questions that other people seemed relieved someone had finally voiced. By the time it ended, she'd accumulated 6 different problems that were apparently now her responsibility. As people filed out, David, the guy who'd challenged her hiring, stopped by Mason's chair. A word, he said, too quiet for most people to hear. Later, David. This can't wait. Mason's jaw tightened. My office. 10 minutes. David left. Elena started gathering her notes, trying to be invisible. That was good, Mason said quietly. Elena looked up. What was? The meeting. You asking questions, offering solutions. People were actually listening by the end. People were judging. Yeah, but that's different than dismissing. You held your own. He stood. I have to deal with David now. Melissa will get you settled. And Elena? Thank you for showing up. He left before she could respond, and Elena was alone in the conference room with her notes and her racing heart and the growing realization that she might have just committed to something completely beyond her capabilities. Melissa appeared in the doorway. Ready for the grand tour? Is it always like that? The hostility? Only when Mason does something unpredictable, which lately is constantly. Melissa gestured for Elena to follow. David's been with the company since the beginning. He thinks he should have more say in hiring decisions. He'll get over it or he won't. And if he doesn't, then Mason will fire him. Mason doesn't keep people who undermine him, no matter how long they've been around. That should have been reassuring. Instead, it reminded Elena how precarious her position was. If Mason could fire someone who'd been here from the start, what chance did she have? Melissa showed her to a desk near a window, away from Mason's office, but with a clear view of most of the floor. Your territory. Computer's already set up. Login credentials are in this envelope. I've scheduled orientation sessions with IT, HR, and finance for the rest of the week. For today, just read through the project files I've loaded and try to get a sense of what's happening. Elena sat in the ergonomic chair that probably cost more than a month of her old rent. The computer monitor was bigger than her TV at home. The desk was clean, empty, waiting for her to fill it with purpose. Melissa, can I ask you something? Shoot. Why did Mason really hire me? The truth. Melissa considered her for a long moment. Honestly, I don't know. I've worked for him for 8 years, and I've never seen him make a decision this fast or this far outside normal procedure. Usually he analyzes everything to death. But with you, he just decided. Created a position, changed the budget, overrode HR's entire process. That doesn't make sense. No, it doesn't. Which means either he sees something in you nobody else does, or he's having some kind of crisis and you're collateral damage. Melissa's expression softened slightly. For what it's worth, I hope it's the former. We could use some fresh perspective around here. She left Elena alone with a computer full of files she didn't understand and a growing sense of vertigo. The morning crawled by. Elena read through project documents, trying to decode corporate language and figure out how pieces connected. She made lists of questions, lists of problems, lists of people she needed to talk to. Around noon, Sarah from the meeting stopped by her desk. Hey, you said you wanted to coordinate on Hendrix? Elena looked up, grateful for human interaction. Yes, absolutely. Both department heads can meet at 2, conference room C. That work? Perfect. Sarah hesitated. Look, I don't know what your deal is or why Mason hired you so suddenly. And honestly, a lot of people are skeptical. But that thing you said in the meeting about making someone accountable, that's the first practical solution anyone's offered in weeks. So thanks. I haven't actually solved it yet. No, but you didn't immediately drown in corporate bullshit, which is more than I expected. Sarah smiled slightly. Anyway, see you at 2. Elena spent the next 2 hours preparing for a meeting she had no business running. She researched both departments, read through 2 months of email chains about the Hendrix account, made a timeline of delays and missed deliverables. By the time 2 o'clock arrived, she'd constructed what she hoped was a reasonable plan. The meeting was a disaster. The marketing director, a man named Tom, who looked perpetually exhausted, arrived 15 minutes late. The product development lead, a woman named Jennifer, who radiated irritation, spent the first 10 minutes explaining why nothing was her department's fault. Elena let them talk, let them blame each other, defend their teams, list all the reasons why coordination was impossible. Then she said, I don't care whose fault it is. Both of them stopped mid-sentence. I don't care about blame or excuses or why this should have worked but didn't. I care about the client getting what they paid for. So here's what's going to happen. Jennifer, your team has specifications finalized by end of day tomorrow. Tom, your team has assets delivered within 3 days of receiving those specs. I'll be tracking both. If either deadline is missed, I'm escalating to Mason with a written explanation of why. Jennifer's eyes narrowed. You can't just... I can. That's literally my job. Operations manager means I make sure operations actually happen. This is me doing that. Elena kept her voice steady, even though her heart was hammering. You can hate me for it. You can complain to Mason, but the client doesn't care about our internal problems. They care about results, so let's get results. Silence. Then Tom laughed. You know what? Fine. We'll have specs tomorrow. Jennifer looked mutinous but nodded. 3 days for assets. Good. I'll send calendar invites for check-ins. This meeting is over. They left. Elena sat alone in the conference room, shaking. She'd just bullied 2 department heads into compliance through sheer force of desperation disguised as authority. It probably wouldn't work, but maybe it would. Her phone buzzed, a text from her neighbor. Rosie has a fever. Nothing serious, but thought you should know. Elena's stomach dropped. Rosie. Sick. And Elena was here, 13 miles away, playing corporate manager while her baby needed her. She should leave, should go home, take care of her daughter, be an actual mother instead of pretending to be something she wasn't. But she'd promised Mason this was a real job, that she wouldn't take special treatment, and she needed this position too badly to risk it on day 1. Elena texted back, Give her children's Tylenol. I'll be home by 6. Call if it gets worse. She felt sick. Bad mother, bad employee, failing at both. But she stayed at her desk and kept working. The afternoon passed in a blur of meetings she barely understood, emails that required responses she wasn't qualified to give, and the constant background awareness that she was faking her way through every interaction. At 5:30, Mason appeared at her desk. How was day 1? Elena looked up, exhausted. Ask me tomorrow when I've had time to process whether I'm fired yet. You're not fired. I heard about the Hendricks meeting. Tom said you were surprisingly effective. He said that? Well, he said you were terrifyingly direct. I'm translating that to surprisingly effective. Despite everything, Elena almost smiled. I might have threatened them a little. Good, they needed it. Mason sat on the edge of her desk. Seriously, though, how are you doing? The question was too kind. Elena felt tears threaten and blinked them back hard. I'm drowning, she admitted. I don't understand half of what people are talking about. I'm making decisions based on guesswork. And my daughter's sick at home while I'm here pretending I know what an operations manager does. Rosie's sick? Just a fever. My neighbor's watching her. It's fine. Elena's sick. Don't. Please don't be understanding right now. I can't afford to fall apart. And if you're nice to me, I will. Mason was quiet for a moment. Then, what if I told you everyone here is also faking it? That half the confidence you see is just people pretending they know what they're doing until they figure it out. I'd say that's a terrible way to run a company. And yet here we are, making millions. He stood. Go home. Be with your daughter. Tomorrow's soon enough to keep drowning. I'm supposed to work until 6. You're supposed to do what I say, and I'm saying go home. Elena wanted to argue, wanted to prove she could handle this, could be professional, could separate work and life the way successful people did. But Rosie was sick, and Ava probably missed her, and Elena was so tired she could barely think straight. Okay, she said quietly. Thank you. She gathered her things and left, feeling everyone's eyes on her as she walked to the elevator. The new hire leaving early on her first day. They probably thought she wouldn't last a week. Elena wasn't sure they were wrong. The bus ride home took 40 minutes. She used the time to close her eyes and try not to cry. When she got home, Rosie was asleep on the couch, flushed but breathing normally. Ava was curled up next to her, reading a picture book quietly so as not to wake her sister. Mommy, Ava whispered. You're home. Elena scooped her up, held her tight. I'm home, baby. How's Rosie? She got hot and cranky, but Mrs. Martinez gave her medicine and she feels better now. Did you have a good first day at work? Elena thought about the hostile meeting, the skeptical co-workers, the moment she'd almost broken down at her desk. It was hard, she said honestly, but I survived. That's good. Surviving is good. Ava snuggled closer. Mr. Mason texted me. What? How? He asked for your number yesterday and you gave it to him, remember? And he texted and said, tell your mom she did great today, but I didn't want to bother you at work, so I waited. Elena pulled out her phone. Sure enough, there was a message from Mason from an hour ago. Tell your mom she did great today. And under it, a second message. Actually, tell her yourself. I'll text her directly. But I wanted you to know too. Then to Elena. You survived your first day. That's more than most people manage. See you tomorrow. Elena sat on the floor next to the couch, Ava in her lap, Rosie sleeping peacefully nearby, and let herself cry. Just for a minute. Just enough to release the pressure that had been building all day. Then she pulled herself together, woke Rosie gently to check her fever, made dinner from the few groceries she had left, and put both girls to bed with stories and kisses and promises that tomorrow would be easier. She didn't know if that was true. But she hoped. And for the first time in 4 years, hope didn't feel completely stupid. The next 3 weeks were brutal. Elena learned the systems, learned the people, learned how to navigate corporate politics she didn't fully understand. She coordinated projects, mediated conflicts, tracked deliverables with a spreadsheet that grew more complex every day. She worked 10-hour days and brought work home at night, studying reports after the girls went to bed, trying to decode corporate language and understand business strategy. Some days she felt like she was getting it. Other days she felt like an imposter waiting to be exposed. Mason checked in regularly but kept his distance professionally. In meetings, he treated her like any other employee. No special consideration, no acknowledgement of how they'd met. To everyone else, she was just another hire who'd come through a referral. But sometimes she'd catch him watching her through his office window, and there was something in his expression she couldn't quite name. David remained hostile. Several other senior employees were openly skeptical, but slowly, grudgingly, people started coming to her when projects stalled or departments couldn't coordinate. Sarah became an unexpected ally, stopping by Elena's desk to offer advice or warn her about office politics. Tom from marketing started inviting her to planning meetings. Even Jennifer from product development admitted after 3 weeks that maybe having someone crack heads isn't the worst thing. Elena's first paycheck arrived on a Friday. $60,000 divided by 26 pay periods minus taxes and benefits. It was more money than she'd seen at once in 2 years. She deposited it, paid her back rent and the eviction fees, bought groceries without counting every dollar, and let herself breathe for the first time since Derek died. That evening, Mason called her into his office. "Close the door," he said. Elena's stomach dropped. This was it. He'd realized his mistake. She was done. "Okay," she said, closing the door and sitting across from him. "The board met this morning," Mason said. "They wanted an update on the operations manager position, whether it was working. And I showed them metrics. Project completion times are down 18% since you started. Interdepartment coordination issues are down 32%. Client satisfaction scores are up." Elena blinked. "Really? Really? You're good at this, Elena. Better than I expected, and I expected you to be good." Relief flooded through her so intensely she felt dizzy. "So I'm not fired? Why would you be fired?" "Because David hates me, because half the company thinks I'm unqualified, because I still don't know what half the acronyms mean. David hates everyone. Half the company thought I was unqualified when I started too. And acronyms are just lazy communication." Mason leaned back. "You're doing exactly what I hired you to do, making things work that weren't working before." Elena wanted to believe him, wanted to accept the compliment without waiting for the other shoe to drop. "Why did you really hire me?" she asked. The actual reason, not the business justification. Mason was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Because you reminded me that I'd forgotten what actually matters. And because I thought maybe if I helped fix your life, I could figure out how to fix mine." The honesty was startling. Elena didn't know what to do with it. "Did it work?" she asked. "I don't know yet. Ask me in a few months." He smiled slightly. "How are the girls?" "Good. Great, actually. Ava starts kindergarten soon. Rosie's in a better daycare. We're in a new apartment, 2 bedrooms, safe neighborhood. I can afford to feed them without choosing between groceries and electricity. That's good. It's because of you. It's because of you. I just gave you an opportunity. You did the work." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Through the glass walls, Elena could see the office winding down for the weekend, people packing up, making plans, living their lives. She had that now. A life that wasn't just survival. "Mason," she said quietly, "thank you for taking a chance on me, for believing I could do this when I didn't believe it myself. Thank you for showing up when you easily could have walked away." Elena stood to leave, then paused at the door. "How's Noah? You mentioned he was having a hard time." "He's better. We're working on it, spending more time together. It's still awkward sometimes, but less than before." "That's good." "Yeah, it is." Elena left him there, surrounded by the empire he'd built, and took the elevator down to the lobby where her new life waited. She picked up the girls from daycare, rode the bus to their new apartment, made dinner in a kitchen that had enough space for all of them. And that night, when Ava asked if she liked her new job, Elena realized she did. She actually, genuinely did. It wasn't perfect. She still struggled, still doubted herself, still had moments where she felt completely lost. But she was building something, not just surviving anymore, building. And that made all the difference. 6 months passed before Mason realized he'd stopped checking his phone every 30 seconds. He was in a Tuesday morning meeting, listening to Elena walk the team through a new project coordination system she'd designed, when it hit him that his phone had been face down on the table for 40 minutes, and he hadn't once felt the urge to flip it over. The realization was startling enough that he almost missed Elena's question. "Mason, thoughts on rolling this out company-wide or piloting it with one department first?" He looked up. She was standing at the front of the conference room, confident in a way that would have seemed impossible 6 months ago. Her hair was different, cut shorter, professional. The blazer she wore actually fit. But it was more than appearance. She moved through the office now like she belonged there, because she did. "Pilot it," he said. "Start with marketing. They're the most resistant to change, so if it works there, it'll work anywhere." Tom groaned. "Why are we always the guinea pigs?" Because you complain the loudest, Elena said without missing a beat. Which means you'll tell me exactly what's broken instead of suffering in silence. I need that feedback. The room laughed. Even Tom smiled. The meeting wrapped up, and people filtered out, several stopping to ask Elena follow-up questions. Mason watched her handle each one with a patience he'd never quite managed. She actually listened to people instead of just waiting for them to finish talking. When the room cleared, Elena started gathering her materials. Mason stayed seated. "You're good at this," he said. She looked up, surprised. "At what?" "Leading. People actually listen to you now. Even David doesn't argue as much anymore." "David called me incompetent yesterday." "Yeah, but to your face, that's progress. Before he was doing it behind your back." Elena laughed. "Your standards for professional relationships are concerning. Corporate politics are just high school with better benefits." She finished packing up her laptop. "Speaking of which, I got the promotion offer from HR. Mason had put that through 3 weeks ago. Director of Operations, $20,000 raise, direct reports. It was overdue, if anything." And I accepted, obviously. But Mason," she hesitated, "you're moving me up really fast. People are going to talk." "People always talk. Do you deserve the promotion?" "I think so, but..." "Then take it. Stop second-guessing yourself." He stood, gathering his own materials. "You've earned it, Elena. Not because I like you or feel sorry for you or whatever people want to believe, because you're actually good at your job." "Okay," she said quietly. "Thank you." They walked back toward the main office area together. Through the glass walls, Mason could see the controlled chaos that had become normal. Projects moving forward, deadlines being met, people actually communicating across departments. It worked now. The company worked. And a huge part of that was Elena. "How are the girls?" he asked. Elena's face softened the way it always did when someone asked about her daughters. "Good. Ava's reading at a second-grade level already. Her kindergarten teacher says she's going to skip her ahead next year, and Rosie just learned to say no to everything, which is adorable and exhausting." "That's the terrible twos for you. How's Noah?" "Better." Mason smiled despite himself. "His new therapist is actually helpful, and we've got a routine now. I pick him up from school most days, we have dinner together, do homework. It's still awkward sometimes, but less than before." "That's good." "Yeah." Mason paused. "He asks about Ava sometimes, whether she's doing okay." "Really? They only met that one time." "I know, but I think she made an impression. The pinky promise thing." Mason felt ridiculous saying it out loud, but it was true. Noah had mentioned Ava at least a dozen times over the past months. Always casual, always in passing, but consistent enough that Mason noticed. Elena smiled. "Ava asks about him too. She thinks he's shy but nice." Accurate assessment. They reached Elena's desk. Mason should have kept walking to his office, should have maintained the professional distance they'd carefully constructed over 6 months of working together. Instead, he said, "We're having a thing at my place this weekend. Nothing formal, just me and Noah ordering too much pizza and watching movies. If you and the girls want to come, you're welcome." Elena's expression shifted to something guarded. "Mason, it's not a date, it's not weird, it's just..." He struggled to find the right words. "Noah could use more friends, and Ava's good with him. That's all." "That's all? That's all?" She studied him for a long moment. Mason tried to look casual, like this wasn't a bigger offer than it seemed, like he hadn't been thinking about making it for weeks. "What time?" Elena asked finally. 5? Saturday?" "We'll be there." Mason nodded and walked away before he could say something that would complicate the carefully neutral relationship they'd maintained. Professional, appropriate, nothing that would make either of them uncomfortable at work. But his heart was beating faster than it should have been for a simple pizza invitation, and he knew she'd noticed. Saturday arrived cold and gray, typical November weather that threatened snow but hadn't quite committed. Mason spent the afternoon stress cleaning his apartment, which was stupid because it was already clean, but he couldn't seem to stop. Noah watched from the couch with undisguised amusement. "You're nervous," he observed. "I'm not nervous." "You've rearranged the throw pillows 3 times. Mason put down the pillow he'd been adjusting. "I just want everything to look nice. It's Elena and the girls, not the president. They've probably seen messy apartments before." Their old apartment was not messy. It was small and had problems, but Elena kept it clean. Noah's eyes narrowed. How do you know what their old apartment looked like? Mason realized his mistake too late. I saw it when I dropped them off that first day. You said you just dropped them at the building. I did. Then how do you know what the inside looked like? Damn, his kid was too smart. I might have helped carry something up. Doesn't matter. The point is, the doorbell rang, saving him from further interrogation. Noah jumped up. I'll get it. He ran to the door and yanked it open before Mason could stop him. Ava stood on the other side, holding her rabbit and practically vibrating with excitement. Behind her, Elena balanced Rosie on one hip while carrying what looked like a homemade pie. Noah! Ava launched herself at him in a hug that made Noah stumble backward. We're here for the movie party. I can see that, Noah said, but he was smiling. Elena stepped inside, looking around with barely concealed awe. Mason, your apartment is too big, he finished. I know. Come in, please. She set Rosie down, and the toddler immediately beelined for the floor-to-ceiling windows. Wow, 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 wow. Rosie, don't touch the glass, Elena called, chasing after her. Ava had already grabbed Noah's hand. Can you show me your room? I want to see where you live. Noah glanced at Mason, who nodded. The two kids disappeared down the hall, Ava chattering the entire way. Elena returned from corralling Rosie, slightly out of breath. Sorry, she's in an adventurous phase. It's fine. The whole place is baby-proofed from when Noah was little. Mason took the pie from her. You didn't have to bring anything. My grandmother's recipe. Apple. I figured if I'm going to invade your space, I should at least contribute. You're not invading. You're invited. There's a difference. They stood in awkward silence for a moment, the first real awkwardness they'd had in months. At work, they had roles to play, scripts to follow. Here, in Mason's personal space on a Saturday evening, those scripts didn't apply. So, Elena said finally, this is where you live. This is it. Excessive square footage and all. It's beautiful. She walked over to the windows where Rosie was pressing her nose against the glass. The view is incredible. Mason joined her, watching the city spread out below them. Sometimes I forget to look at it. I've lived here 5 years, and I think I've actually stopped and appreciated the view maybe a dozen times. That's sad. Probably. I'm usually too busy working to notice. Are you still doing that? Working all the time? Mason thought about it, less than before. I'm trying to be better about it. For Noah. How's that going? Some days are better than others. I still catch myself checking emails at dinner or taking calls during homework time. But I'm trying. Rosie slapped the window with both palms, leaving perfect handprints. Big! Big, big! Very big, Elena agreed. She glanced at Mason. Sorry about the handprints. Adds character. They ordered pizza, 3 large pizzas that were definitely too much food, but Noah had insisted on variety. When it arrived, they spread out in the living room, kids on the floor with paper plates, adults on the couch. Ava was in heaven. She talked nonstop about kindergarten, her teacher, a boy named Marcus who was mean, but she wasn't scared of him, the book she was reading, everything. Noah listened with the patience of someone who'd learned that sometimes people just needed to talk. Rosie ate 1 bite of pizza, smeared sauce on her face, and demanded to know where the toys were. I don't really have toddler toys anymore, Mason admitted. That's okay, Elena said. She'll find something to entertain herself. Yesterday she played with a cardboard box for an hour. As if to prove the point, Rosie discovered the throw pillows Noah had mocked Mason for arranging and began building a fort. They put on a movie, some animated thing about a kid who saved the world through the power of friendship and believing in yourself. Standard children's movie fare. But halfway through, Mason realized he wasn't watching the screen. He was watching Elena. She'd kicked off her shoes and tucked her feet under her on the couch. Her hair was down, casual in a way he'd never seen at work. She was laughing at something Ava said, her whole face transforming with genuine joy. Beautiful. The thought came unbidden and uncomfortable. She was beautiful. When had that happened? When had Elena gone from someone he was helping to someone he couldn't stop thinking about? She caught him staring. What? Nothing. Sorry. Zoned out. But she held his gaze for a moment longer than necessary, and something passed between them that had nothing to do with work or professional courtesy. The movie ended. They put on another one, but the kids were fading. Rosie fell asleep on Elena's lap. Ava was fighting it, determined to stay awake, but her eyes kept drooping. "We should probably go," Elena said quietly. "You can stay longer. Put them in Noah's room if they need to sleep." "Mason, we've been here 4 hours. That's a long time to invade someone's space." "You keep using that word, invade, like you're not welcome here." Elena carefully shifted Rosie into a more comfortable position. "Are we? Welcome?" The question was loaded with more than surface meaning. Mason knew that. They both knew that. "Yeah," he said. "You are." Noah appeared from wherever he'd been hiding. "Ava's asleep on my bed. She said she was just resting her eyes, but then she started snoring." Elena smiled. "She does that. I can carry her down. Or we could just let them sleep," Mason said. "It's late. You'd have to wake them up, get them dressed, deal with cranky, tired kids on public transit. Why not just stay?" "Stay? Here?" "Guest room's made up. You and the girls can share it. It's got a king bed and a day bed. Plenty of space." Elena looked torn. "Mason, we can't just..." "Why not?" "Because..." She struggled to find a reason that wasn't just propriety for propriety's sake. "Because people at work would talk if they knew. People at work don't need to know, and honestly, I've stopped caring what they think." "Easy for you to say. You own the company. You're director of operations now. You've earned the right to stop caring too." Elena laughed quietly, careful not to wake Rosie. "Is that how it works?" "I'm declaring it a job benefit. Director level and above, you're allowed to stop caring about office gossip." Tempting offer. They sat in comfortable silence while the second movie played on, unwatched. Noah had disappeared again, probably to his room where Ava was sleeping. Rosie snored softly in Elena's lap. "Can I ask you something?" Elena said finally. "Sure." "Why did you really invite us here tonight?" Mason had been expecting this question for hours, had known it was coming, but he still didn't have a good answer. "Because I wanted to," he said. "Because Noah and I rattle around in this apartment alone and it gets old. Because Ava makes him smile in a way other kids don't. Because I like having you here." "As your employee?" "As my friend." The word hung in the air between them. Friend. It should have been safe, neutral, but it felt like more than that, and they both knew it. "We're friends?" Elena asked quietly. "Aren't we?" "I mean, we got here in a weird way, but yeah, I think we're friends." "Friends don't usually hire each other." "I didn't hire my friend. I hired someone who needed a job. We became friends after." Elena was quiet for a long time, absently stroking Rosie's hair while the toddler slept. "I think we should be careful," she finally said. "Careful about what?" "About blurring lines. You're my boss, Mason. That power dynamic exists whether we acknowledge it or not. I know that. And if things get complicated, if people think there's something inappropriate happening, it hurts both of us. But it hurts me more. I'm the one who'll be accused of sleeping her way to success." The words stung because they were true. Mason hadn't thought about it that way, had been too focused on his own feelings to consider how it would look from the outside. "You're right," he said. "I'm sorry, I wasn't thinking about..." "I'm not saying we can't be friends," Elena interrupted. "I'm just saying we need to be smart about it. Maintain boundaries. Keep work and personal separate." "Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And we should probably not do this again. The hanging out at your apartment thing, it sends the wrong message." Mason wanted to argue, wanted to say that he didn't care about messages or optics or what anyone thought. But that was privilege talking, his privilege, as the owner, as the man, as the person with nothing to lose. Elena had everything to lose. "Okay," he said quietly. "I understand." She looked sad about it, which somehow made it worse. "I'm going to put Rosie in the guest room. Can you check on the other two?" "Yeah, of course." Mason went to Noah's room and found both kids sprawled on the bed, completely unconscious. Ava still clutched her rabbit. Noah had given up half his pillow to accommodate her. They looked peaceful, innocent, uncomplicated in the way only children could be. Mason carefully removed Noah's shoes and pulled a blanket over both of them. As he turned to leave, Noah mumbled something in his sleep that sounded like stay. Mason stayed, sitting on the edge of the bed for a few minutes, watching his son sleep next to a little girl who'd somehow become important to both of them. When he finally left, he found Elena in the guest room, tucking Rosie into the daybed. "They're out cold," he said from the doorway. "Good. Thank you for this, for letting us stay." "Anytime." Mason, I know, boundaries, I get it. He leaned against the door frame. "For what it's worth, I wasn't trying to make things complicated. I just wanted to spend time with people I care about." "I know. And I want that too, but we have to be smart." "You're right. You're always right. It's annoying." That got a small smile. "Get used to it." Mason went to his own room but didn't sleep. He lay awake thinking about boundaries and power dynamics, and all the ways caring about someone could become complicated when your lives were already entangled. Around 2 a.m., he heard footsteps in the hallway. Ava's small voice calling for her mom. Elena's quiet response, soothing. The sound of a bathroom door, water running, then footsteps retreating. Family sounds, domestic sounds, the kind of sounds his apartment had never held before. He wanted this. That was the problem. He wanted Elena and her daughters here, filling the empty spaces he'd pretended didn't exist. Wanted Ava's chatter and Rosie's chaos and Elena's laugh. But wanting wasn't enough. Wanting without wisdom was just selfishness. So he'd maintain the boundaries, keep things professional at work, friendly but distant outside it. He'd be Noah's father and Elena's boss, and nothing more complicated than that, even if it felt like cutting off a possibility before it had a chance to become real. Sunday morning arrived with weak sunlight through the windows. Mason made pancakes, successfully this time, and the apartment filled with the sounds of children and conversation. Ava declared the pancakes were the best she'd ever had, which was probably a lie, but Mason appreciated the enthusiasm. Rosie wore more syrup than she consumed. Noah actually joined the conversation instead of hiding behind his tablet. It felt normal, right? And temporary. After breakfast, Elena gathered her daughters and their things. "We should get going. Let you have your Sunday back. You're not imposing." "I know, but still." She helped Rosie into her coat while Ava hugged Noah goodbye with promises to see him again soon. At the door, Elena paused. "Thank you for this. It was nice." "Yeah, it was. But we should probably not do it again." "I know." She looked like she wanted to say something else, but stopped herself. Instead, she gathered her daughters and left, and Mason's apartment returned to its usual state, beautiful, expensive, and crushingly empty. Noah stood next to him, watching through the window as Elena and the girls waited for the bus at the corner. "You like her," Noah observed. Mason thought about denying it, but Noah was too perceptive, and lying seemed pointless. "Yeah, I do." "Does she like you?" "I don't know. Maybe. But it's complicated." "Because she works for you?" "That's part of it." "That's dumb. If you like each other, that should be enough." "It's not that simple when you're an adult. Everything's not that simple when you're an adult. That's why you're all so unhappy." Mason looked at his son, who was staring out at the city with the kind of wisdom 8-year-olds shouldn't have. "When did you get so smart?" Mason asked. "I was always smart. You just started paying attention." Fair point. They spent the rest of Sunday together, cleaning up from the night before, running errands, doing homework, normal Sunday things that felt less lonely than they used to. That night, after Noah went to bed, Mason's phone rang. "Elena." "Hey," he answered. "Everything okay?" "Fine. The girls are asleep. I wanted to say something I didn't say earlier." "Okay." "I had a really good time last night, like the best time I've had in years. And I know I'm the one who said we need boundaries, and we do. But I don't want you to think I don't care about you, because I do. A lot. Maybe more than I should." Mason's heart was suddenly beating too fast. "Elena." "Let me finish. I care about you. Noah, too. You've both become really important to me and the girls. But I can't afford to mess this up. The job, the stability, everything I've built in the last 6 months. I need you to understand that." "I do understand." "Do you?" "Because sometimes I think you don't realize how much power you have in this situation. You can afford to take risks. I can't, If things go wrong between us, you lose a good employee. I lose everything. The words hit hard because they were true. Mason had been so focused on his own feelings that he hadn't fully considered the asymmetry of their positions. You're right, he said. I haven't been thinking about it that way. I've been selfish. You've been kind. But kindness without consideration is just another form of selfishness. I don't want to make your life harder. I know. That's why I'm saying this, so we can figure out how to be in each other's lives without destroying what we've both built. Mason sat down on his couch, staring out at the city lights. What if we just keep doing what we're doing, professional at work, friendly outside it, slow, careful? Can you do that? Be patient? For you? Yeah, I can. Elena was quiet for a moment, then, Ava wants to have a play date with Noah. She's been asking all day. Noah would love that. But not at your place. Neutral ground, park, maybe. Or that museum you took him to. Okay, when? Next Saturday, if you're free? I'm free. Okay. He could hear the smile in her voice. It's a date. I mean, not a date. A play date. For the kids. Right. For the kids. They said goodnight and hung up, and Mason sat in the dark feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Hope that actually felt reasonable instead of desperate. The next 6 months unfolded slowly, carefully. Mason and Elena maintained their professional relationship at work. Polite, friendly, appropriate. But outside the office, they started building something else. Playdates with the kids that became regular weekend events, coffee, on Saturday mornings at the cafe where they'd first met. Phone calls that lasted hours about nothing and everything. They were careful, aware of boundaries. But the boundaries started to feel less like walls and more like guidelines, flexible enough to allow something real to develop. Noah and Ava became inseparable. Two kids who'd both learned too early that life was fragile and people left, finding comfort in each other's company. They built blanket forts and played elaborate imaginary games and taught Rosie how to stack blocks. And slowly, quietly, Mason's relationship with his son deepened into something genuine. They talked more. Fought occasionally, which Noah's therapist said was actually healthy. Learned how to be honest with each other. Elena thrived at work. The promotion stuck. She hired her own team, implemented systems that made the whole company run smoother. Even David grudgingly admitted she was good at her job. And through it all, Mason and Elena circled each other like planets in orbit, close enough to feel the pull, distant enough to maintain stability. Until the day everything shifted. It was a Tuesday in May, nearly a year after that first rainy morning in the cafe. Mason was in his office when Melissa knocked on the door frame. Elena needs to see you. Says it's urgent. Mason looked up, immediately concerned. Elena never interrupted his day without good reason. Send her in. Elena appeared, face pale, holding a folder. She closed the door behind her, which was unusual. What's wrong? Mason asked. I got a job offer. Competing firm. They headhunted me. Mason's stomach dropped. Oh. Yeah. Oh. She sat down across from him, set the folder on his desk. They're offering $30,000 more than I make now. Director title with equity. Full autonomy over operations. That's a really good offer. It is. They sat in silence. Through the glass walls, the office continued its normal rhythm, oblivious to the fact that Mason's world was currently tilting sideways. Are you going to take it? He asked. I don't know. That's why I'm here, to talk it through. With your boss? With my friend. Mason leaned back in his chair, trying to organize thoughts that were currently scattered. What do you want me to say? I want you to tell me what to do. I can't do that. Why not? Because I'm biased. I don't want you to leave. Not just because you're good at your job, but because... He stopped, aware they were having this conversation where anyone could see through the glass. Because I've gotten used to having you around. Elena's expression softened. I've gotten used to being around. But that's not a reason to turn down a better opportunity, isn't it? The money's great, but I'd be starting over. New company, new people, new politics to navigate. And I'd have to... She hesitated. I'd have to leave you, all of you, this whole life we've built. We'd still see each other, outside work. Would we? Or would it get complicated? You're my current boss, which already makes things weird. If I'm working for your competitor, it gets weirder. Mason hadn't thought about that. But she was right. Their careful balance depended partially on the structure their professional relationship provided. Remove that, and what did they have? What do you want? He asked. Forget the money, the title, all of it. What do you actually want? Elena looked at him for a long moment. Then she stood up, walked to the door, and locked it. Turned back to face him. What are you doing? Mason asked. Something I've been wanting to do for 6 months. She crossed the space between them and kissed him. It was brief, soft, and completely unexpected. When she pulled back, Mason just stared at her. I want to stay here, Elena said quietly. Not because of the job, although I love the job, but because of you. Because Noah and Ava are friends. Because Rosie lights up when we visit your apartment. Because I've fallen for you, and I'm tired of pretending I haven't. Mason's brain was struggling to process words while his heart raced. You... What? I'm in love with you, Mason. Have been for months. But I've been so scared of messing everything up that I've kept quiet. And now I have this offer, and I realized I don't want it. I want this. Us. Whatever this could be if we stopped being so careful. Mason stood up, moved around the desk until he was standing in front of her. Elena, If you're about to tell me this is a bad idea, I already know. I know all the reasons why this is complicated and potentially disastrous. I know the power dynamics, the office gossip, all of it. But I don't care anymore. Life's too short. Derek taught me that. You don't get unlimited time to be happy, so when you find something that makes you happy, you hold on to it. Mason couldn't help it. He kissed her back, properly this time, pulling her close and feeling 6 months of careful distance collapse into nothing. When they finally broke apart, he said, I'm in love with you too. Have been since you yelled at me outside the cafe for running that background check. That's a weird moment to fall in love with someone. You were so angry, so fierce. I'd never had anyone stand up to me like that. It was... He smiled. It was really attractive, actually. Elena laughed and the sound filled his office with something it had never held before, joy. So what do we do? She asked. About the job offer, about us, about all of it. Mason thought about it, considered the complications, the challenges, the 1,000 ways this could go wrong. Then he thought about the alternative. Elena leaving, their careful friendship fading into polite distance, spending the rest of his life wondering what might have been if he'd been brave enough to try. You turned down the offer, he said. Stay here. We'll navigate the office politics together, and we'll figure out what this is, what we are, one step at a time. People will talk. Let them. You were right before. I can afford to take risks. But you know what? So can you now. You've proven yourself. You're not the charity hire anymore. You're the director who turned operations around and saved this company millions. You really believe that? I have the metrics to prove it. Elena smiled, then sobered slightly. What about Noah and the girls? If this goes wrong, then we handle it like adults. But I don't think it's going to go wrong. Do you? No, she admitted. I really don't. They kissed again, longer this time, and Mason was dimly aware that anyone looking through the glass walls could see them. He didn't care. When they finally pulled apart, Elena said, I should probably get back to work. People are going to wonder why I've been in here so long. Let them wonder. Mason, you're right, professional boundaries. We should maintain some of those. He straightened his tie, which had gotten twisted somehow. Turn down the offer. Then let's have dinner tonight. Somewhere nice, just us. No kids, no distractions. Is that appropriate? Dating my boss? Probably not. But I'm willing to risk it if you are. Elena pretended to consider it. Okay, but somewhere really nice. You're a billionaire. I expect to be impressed. Deal. She unlocked the door and left, and Mason stood in his office watching her walk back to her desk, aware that everyone was definitely going to talk and completely okay with it. Melissa appeared in his doorway moments later. Do I want to know what just happened? Probably not. Are you dating Elena? I'm planning to, yeah. Melissa studied him for a moment, then smiled. Good, it's about time. You're not surprised? Mason, you've been in love with her since approximately the second week she worked here. Everyone knows, except apparently you two. Everyone? Everyone. There's a running bet about when you'd finally make a move. I just won $300. Mason didn't know whether to be embarrassed or amused. You bet on my personal life? Your personal life affects everyone's work life. We had a vested interest. Melissa's expression turned more serious. For what it's worth, I think she's good for you. You're less of a robot than you used to be. That's a low bar. And yet you were barely clearing it before she showed up. Melissa left, and Mason sat at his desk trying to focus on work while his mind spun with possibilities. That night he took Elena to the nicest restaurant in Chicago, the kind of place where reservations required weeks of advance notice unless your name was Mason Reed. They sat at a table overlooking the city and talked for hours about everything and nothing. The kids were at Elena's neighbor's apartment for the evening, probably staying up too late and eating too much sugar. Mason didn't care. For once, he was living in the present instead of worrying about what came next. "So," Elena said over dessert, "how do we do this? The whole dating while working together thing? Honestly, I have no idea. I've never done this before. Neither have I. Derek and I met in college. Dating in the workplace is completely foreign to me. We could keep it quiet for a while, until we figure out if this is real. It feels pretty real to me already." "Me too, but people are going to have opinions. Might be easier if we wait to make it official." Elena considered this. "Okay, quiet for now. But Mason, I'm done being careful. If this is happening, I want it to actually happen, not some half version where we pretend in public and only get to be real in private." "Agreed. Give it 3 months. If we're still together, still happy, we tell everyone, make it official. And if we're not, then we deal with it. But I don't think that's going to happen." "You sound very confident." "I am. This is the first thing I've been truly confident about in years." They finished dinner and Mason drove her home. At her door, he kissed her goodnight like a teenager, aware of her neighbors possibly watching but not caring enough to stop. "See you tomorrow?" Elena asked. "See you tomorrow." Mason drove home feeling lighter than he had in years, maybe ever. The next 3 months were a careful dance of professional distance and personal intimacy. At work, they maintained appropriate boundaries. Outside work, they built a relationship that felt surprisingly easy. They took the kids to Navy Pier, to the aquarium, to every park in Chicago. Had family dinners that felt more natural every time. Learned each other's rhythms and quirks and damage. Elena told him about Derek, about the grief that never quite went away, but had learned to coexist with happiness. Mason told her about his ex-wife, about the loneliness that had driven him to build an empire as a distraction from feeling anything real. They were honest with each other in ways that felt risky and necessary. Noah and Ava accepted the relationship with the easy adaptability of children. Rosie started calling Mason May and refused to be corrected. The 4 of them became a unit, not quite a family, but something close. And at work, Elena continued to excel. The promotion stuck. Her team grew. Projects ran smoother than they ever had. People talked, of course. Whispers about favoritism and inappropriate relationships followed them both. But Elena's work spoke for itself, and eventually, even the skeptics had to admit she'd earned her position. 3 months to the day after their first official date, Mason called a company-wide meeting. "This is either really brave or really stupid," Elena whispered as they stood in front of the entire staff. "Probably both," Mason agreed. Then, louder. "Thanks for coming, everyone. This will be brief. I wanted to announce that Elena Brooks and I are in a relationship. We've been dating for 3 months, and we're making it official company knowledge now." The room was silent for a beat. Then someone in the back started clapping. Sarah joined in. Within seconds, the whole room was applauding, and Mason realized with surprise that most people seemed genuinely happy. After the meeting, David approached them. Mason braced for confrontation. "I owe you an apology," David said to Elena. "I fought your hiring, questioned your qualifications, made your first months here harder than they needed to be." "Yes, you did," Elena agreed evenly. "You've proven me wrong. You're good at this job, really good, and I'm man enough to admit when I'm wrong." He extended his hand. "Congratulations, both of you." Elena shook it, surprised. Mason did the same. As David walked away, Elena turned to Mason. "Did that really just happen?" "I think we broke him. He's never admitted being wrong about anything." There's a first time for everything. They stood together watching their team return to work, and Mason felt something he'd never quite felt before. Contentment. Not happiness, which was fleeting. Not success, which was empty without meaning. But genuine contentment with the life he'd built and the people he'd built it with. 1 year after the rainy morning that changed everything, Mason and Elena took all 3 kids to the memorial for fallen firefighters. It was a cool autumn afternoon, leaves falling in shades of gold and red. They walked through the memorial garden reading names, Ava holding the rabbit that had started everything. When they reached Derek's name, Ava placed the rabbit carefully at the base of the memorial wall. "I wanted Dad to see him," she explained, "to know he's all fixed now, that we're all okay." Elena knelt next to her daughter, tears streaming down her face. "We are okay, baby. We're more than okay." Ava looked up at Mason, who was standing behind them with Noah and Rosie. "I think Dad would like you," she said seriously. "You're nice, and you make Mommy smile. She didn't smile much before." Mason's throat was too tight to speak. He just nodded. Later, as they walked back to the car, Noah slipped his hand into Mason's. Ava took Mason's other hand. Rosie rode on Elena's hip, chattering about the pretty leaves. They looked, Mason realized, like a family. Not a perfect family. They were all too damaged for that, too marked by loss and struggle and the hard reality of life that didn't care about fairness. But a real family, built not on shared blood or legal documents, but on choice, on showing up, on fixing broken things because they mattered. That evening, after the kids were asleep, all 3 in Noah's room, having insisted on a sleepover, Mason and Elena sat on his balcony overlooking the city. "Do you ever think about that morning?" Elena asked. "In the cafe?" "All the time." "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Ava hadn't asked you to fix the rabbit?" Mason thought about it. About the man he'd been that morning, numb and empty and going through motions. About the life he would have continued living, successful and hollow. "I don't like to," he admitted. "That version of my life was pretty bleak." "Mine too." Elena leaned against him. "I was drowning, literally weeks away from losing everything. If you hadn't helped, you would have figured something out. You're resourceful. Maybe. But it would have been harder, lonelier." She turned to look at him. "You saved us, Mason. You know that, right?" "I didn't save you. I gave you an opportunity. You saved yourself." "We can both be right." They sat in comfortable silence, watching lights flicker across the city. Somewhere out there, other people were struggling, drowning, desperately holding on to broken things that mattered. Mason thought about the man he'd been a year ago, too afraid of feeling anything to help a little girl fix a stuffed rabbit. "I want to do more," he said suddenly. "More what?" "More helping, not just you, other people, single parents, people struggling, kids who need support. I have money, resources, influence. I should be using it for more than just making more money." Elena smiled. "You've been thinking about this?" "For months. I just didn't know how to start. We could start a foundation, partner with social services, create opportunities for people like I was. Job training, placement assistance, childcare support." "You'd help run it? Are you kidding? I'd love to." Her eyes were bright with possibility. "We could actually make a difference. We could call it the Brooks Foundation. After Derek." Elena's breath caught. "Really?" "He saved people for a living. This would be continuing that. Seems fitting." She kissed him, soft and grateful and full of promise. "I love you. I love you too." 2 years later, the Brooks Foundation had helped 47 single parents find stable employment and housing. 3 years after that, the number was over 200. Mason scaled back his work at the company, promoting Elena to COO and eventually bringing in outside management so they could both focus on the foundation. Noah graduated from 8th grade with honors and a letter of recommendation from his former teacher that made Mason cry. Ava won a writing competition with a story about a rabbit that survived being broken because someone cared enough to fix it. Rosie started kindergarten and immediately became the most popular kid in her class. They bought a house together, not Mason's penthouse or Elena's apartment, but a real house with a yard where all 3 kids could play. They got a dog that Rosie named Pancake for reasons no one could quite understand. Mason and Elena got married on a fall afternoon in the same park where they'd taken the kids on their first official play date. It was small, intimate, just family and close friends. Ava was the flower girl, walking down the aisle with the rabbit tucked under her arm. Noah was the best man, giving a speech that was equal parts funny and touching. Rosie scattered petals with chaotic enthusiasm and refused to stop even after she'd reached the end of the aisle. It wasn't perfect. The weather was too cold. Rosie spilled punch on her dress. The photographer missed the actual kiss because he was checking his camera settings. But it was real. Messy and beautiful and completely, utterly real. That night, after the kids were finally asleep and the house was quiet, Mason and Elena stood in their kitchen, their shared kitchen in their shared house with their shared life. And Mason thought about the journey that had brought them here. From a rainy morning and a broken rabbit to this, a life built on second chances and the courage to help someone when it would have been easier to walk away. "What are you thinking about?" Elena asked. "How different everything is now." "Good different?" "The best different." He pulled her close. "I was so empty before you. I didn't even realize how much until I wasn't anymore. I was drowning before you. Every day felt like barely surviving. We saved each other. We did. And we keep saving each other. Every day." They stood together in the quiet house, listening to the sounds of children breathing in bedrooms down the hall, a dog snoring in the living room, a life fully lived. And Mason thought about Ava, years ago, asking him to help fix something broken. He thought she meant the rabbit, but really, she'd been asking him to fix himself. To remember that success without connection was just expensive loneliness. That helping others was how you helped yourself. That sometimes broken things survived if someone cared enough to try. The rabbit still sat on Ava's bed, a little more worn but carefully mended. A reminder that damage didn't mean destroyed. That brokenness wasn't permanent. That with care and patience and love, almost anything could be made whole again. Even people, especially people. And that rainy November morning, the one where a lonely billionaire and a desperate mother and 3 damaged children found each other in a rundown cafe, became the moment everything changed. Not because of grand gestures or dramatic revelations, but because one small girl asked for help and someone actually stopped to give it. Sometimes that's all it takes. One person caring enough to try. One broken thing worth fixing. One rainy morning where everything shifts. And suddenly, the whole world looks different.